everyone. Kelly Beatty coming to you live from the Chelmsford Senior Center for the spring session of the annual town meeting. For those of you who have followed this in the past, you know that tonight is budget night. And early on, we're going to get into the budget for the coming fiscal year, which begins on July 1st. There are 29 articles on this warrant, and as far as I know, none of them have been withdrawn. So that means that we're in for 2, maybe 3 action-packed nights here at town meeting. And right off the bat, we're going to start with town reports, which includes an overview of some of the goings-on with the projects behind the scenes. But already with Article 2, we're talking about amending the fiscal 2017 budget by $789,000, which will be drawn from cash reserves and also the FinCom Finance Committee optional fund that they have at their disposal. Part of that is because, for example, this past winter, we overspent our snow budget by about $300,000. So that's an early indication of the money will be flowing. Article 3 involves Neshoba Tech's annual budget for the town, which is $2.9 million. Always an interesting talking point. Town meeting reps are keen to find out if we're getting our money's worth out of the students that we sent to Neshoba Tech. In past town meetings, there have been a lot of discussion surrounding how much money Neshoba Tech has in its reserves and why it isn't spending more of it. Expect to hear more on that. The 2 big budget items will be Article 4, which is the Chelmsford Public Schools operating budget, which town manager Paul Cohen has put forward at $57 million. That's an increase of about 4.5% over last year. You would think that would be healthy. However, the schools themselves would prefer $57.5 million, another $500,000. And you're going to see tonight probably an impassioned plea made to try to get some or all of that money restored. We've already seen some nice glossy promotional materials by the schools to try to make their case. If they don't get that money, among other things, it will mean the reduction of 5 teachers in the high school and middle school in order to make ends meet. Then we'll move on to Article 5, which is the general operating government budget, which is $61.2 million. A lot of that will involve sizable increases in the amount we're paying out for insurance and what's called OPEB, O-P-E-B. Get used to that. You're going to hear it a lot tonight. That's other post-employment benefits. It's the many millions of dollars that Chelmsford owes on its account in order to pay for the retirement benefits of retired employees here in the town. And finally, 2 more things I want to draw to your attention. First is Article 6, 2 collective bargaining agreements with town unions. One's the clerical union and the other is the public safety dispatchers. My understanding is that both of those have been approved very late in the game, so there'll be some additional money needed to cover those agreements. And then finally, Article 8, which will be the capital plan. These are the projects that the town has in store for the coming year, new vehicles that need to be purchased. There's approximately $1 million that's been allocated to fix different things at the schools, improve technology. In addition, a separate budget item, Article 9, will ask for $266,000 to improve the air conditioning at some of the schools, which has been in pretty rotten shape these past few years and needs to be fixed because the students have been pretty uncomfortable both in winter and in summer. Now again, that's just through Article 9 of the 29 articles. I won't say they'll all be that involved. Later on, we'll have some interesting ones. For example, Article 21, the town will ask the state legislature for permission to have 10 more alcohol licenses to be dispatched. Right now, we've dispensed 35 all alcohol licenses, that's beer, wine, and hard liquor, and 7 for just beer and wine. There's only 1 remaining. I think one of the things that you'll see brought up is that grocery stores in town, Stop and Shop and Market Basket and Hannaford, all would like to sell beer and wine, and there haven't been licenses available to give them to those. So I think you'll hear the supermarkets coming to bear in the that's Article 21. We're very unlikely to get to that tonight. And then finally, I want to draw your attention to a very interesting bylaw amendment, which is Article 28, in which the town moderator, John Curlin, who you'll hear in just a moment, hopes to amend the town bylaws so that the question and answer period here at town meeting will be eliminated. For those of you who are close observers, you know that after an article is presented to the floor, there is first a period of question and answer in which there's not supposed to be any debate, followed by a period of debate. And the lines have been really blurred in the recent years. And so I think John Curlin is sort of accepting what is pretty obvious, which is we just want to get started with the debate from the get-go and stop with trying to make it a distinction between the two. That and many more, including regulations involving asphalt plants, speed limits here in town. And for those of you who were here last fall, you'll remember that town meeting approved an overlay, zoning overlay, to the Route 129 corridor in an attempt to bring more varied businesses to what's becoming a pretty bleak corporate landscape. And tonight, well, not tonight, probably later on in town meeting, the town meeting reps will be asked to appropriate at least $50,000, maybe more, we'll see, to a sort of advertising and branding campaign so that we can actually get the word out to businesses, large and small, to come to Chelmsford, again, to populate the many empty buildings that exist along that corridor and bring vitality back to that district. So sit back and relax. We'll probably be at this at least until 10:30, maybe close to 11 o'clock. Kind of depends on where we are in the budget debate. We'll hear many arguments for and against various budget numbers. And so if you wish, you can get this warrant. It's available in the Town of Chelmsford website, but just sit back and watch it live happening right here. Stay tuned, please.
To the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, the town clerk, Onorina Maloney, will swear in the recently elected town meeting representatives. So I'll turn the microphone over to our wonderfully talented town clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. All re-elected and newly elected town meeting reps, please stand up. Okay, please raise your right hand. You will be repeating after me. When I say state your name, you will be stating your name. I, and state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a town meeting representative according to the bylaws and charter of the town of Chelmsford, the laws of the Commonwealth, and the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. You are so sworn. Congratulations to you all, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, and congratulations. Are we ready to test the voting devices? So at this point, please turn on your voting device and make sure that you're registered. And while you're doing that, I will announce that the location of the fire exits, there's 2 on each side of the hall, and then if you go out through the main lobby, there's an exit out there as well. I've also been asked to request that if you have to leave the meeting early, kindly drop off your electronic voting devices with the checkers in the front hall.
Oh, okay. So it should say yes there now.
I declare, based on the vote, that we have a quorum. Okay. I have reviewed the warrant for this town election and state for the record that it has been duly served in compliance with law. I would like to welcome all the town meeting reps to tonight's meeting. As has been our practice, we have two screens to try to address the difficulty that some reps have had reading the articles upon which you will be voting. You can also view the slides on the screen, including amendments to warrant articles, on your iPads, laptops, computers, or other smart devices. Simply lock on using the instructions on the screen, which was right previously listed, but it's capital T, capital O, capital C, dash guest, and the password is Chelmsford Lions. I want to thank Chelmsford Telemedia for their assistance in trying to address this issue, and we will continue to work to ensure that all of you have the ability to read not only the warrant articles as originally presented, but also as amended. Speaking of amendments, all amendments will be submitted on the forms, which you can get from either the town clerk or myself. If you know prior to town meeting that you intend to file an amendment, you can see me or Onorina Maloney prior to the meeting for the forms, or you can email them to me, and I will make the necessary copies and distribute them to town council and the typists so that they will be ready before town meeting begins. And if you get it to either of us prior to the introduction of that article, town council should have the opportunity to review the amendment, which will expedite the meeting. This form will create an original in 3 copies. The white top copy goes to myself, the yellow copy to the amendment assistant, which is generally John Souza up there, the pink copy to the town clerk, and you retain the orange copy for your records. All questions and debate shall emanate from the microphone facing the moderator in the center of the hall and shall go through the moderator. Board or committee members, other town officials, or department heads may use other microphones to answer questions or provide information to the meeting. Speakers shall refrain from rhetorical or argumentative questions during the question and answer period and shall only ask questions seeking needed information. The questions should be in a who, what, when, where, and why mode. They should not start or end with, isn't it true, or wouldn't you admit? Those are best served for debate, and I would prefer not to have to rule questions out of order, but I am bound by the laws and regulations that define our conduct, and I will do my best to enforce them fairly and respectfully. I will allow a reasonable amount of time for follow-up questions, but I will have to intervene if any individual is asking an excessive number of follow-up questions. With respect to discussion, speakers are encouraged to be brief, and this year I shall limit each speaker to 5 minutes of debate. You should be able to make your points within 5 minutes. If you truly believe that is not enough time for you to make your arguments, kindly advise me in advance, and I will allow some leeway. Last fall, we experimented with dispensing having a separate question and answer period, and we incorporated the Q&A with the discussion period. Almost all towns do not have a separation between inquiry and discussion, and it worked very well for us. I will be asking for a vote at the beginning of town meeting to dispense with the separate question and answer period, but of course you will still have the opportunity to ask your questions during discussion, which has always been our practice. Making inquiries will not be considered part of your 5-minute discussion limit. We do have some other rules of protocol. Please do not refer to any prior speaker by name. Proper designation is to call him or her the previous speaker. Please refrain from personal attacks. Challenging or arguing in opposition to another's position is fair game and is what this meeting is all about. Intentional slander against any individual or group cannot be tolerated. Let us refrain from repeating arguments that have already been made, but new ideas or distinctions are welcome and encouraged. Discussion of pending litigation will not be permitted unless specifically included in the warrant article being debated. If during the course of discussion I observe several speakers on one side of an issue but none in opposition, I will interrupt the debate to inquire if there are any who wish to express the opposing position or offer an amendment. If there are none, I shall end debate and move the question. If there is opposition, I will move that party to the front of the line and allow debate to continue. I trust you will all appreciate how this will advance our mutual goal of moving town meeting along. To those who may be next in line, should I ever have to exercise this process, you have my apologies in advance. There will not be any debating from the presenter's podium. They may answer questions during question and answer and during discussion, but should they want to engage in debate, presenters would have to queue up in line like everyone else. A person should not speak a second in time until everyone has had an opportunity to speak, unless the previous speaker wishes to correct or dispute a statement of fact made by another previous speaker. This privilege will be narrowly construed by the moderator. Transparency and effective governance are the two goals of town meeting. This is your town meeting, so you will decide on the process that you believe best achieves these goals. Last year, you agreed to permitting a consent agenda, and it worked well. Consent agendas are often used in other communities, and I think that it is something that would allow us to shorten the length of meetings, yet still serve our town in a transparent manner. A consent agenda allows representatives to bundle several routine warrant articles into one, so that instead of taking 4 or 5 separate votes on essentially bookkeeping articles, we take one vote on all of them. The town manager and I have discussed the type of articles that would be conducive to this process. These are articles that generally do not involve any questions or debate and are passed on in the normal course of town business. The process is simple. At any time after committee reports and prior to the presentation of the first article to be part of the consent agenda, any town meeting representative or myself may move that the body vote to approve the consent agenda involving the articles to be included in the consent agenda. This allows for questions and answers and discussion with discussion with the opportunity to add or delete consent agenda articles as town meeting deems best. The articles that I am suggesting for a consent agenda are Articles 7, 12, 13, 17, and 18. I originally planned on including Article 11, but at pre-town meeting a representative expressed concerns about that article, so I removed it since it would defeat the purpose of this process to argue over and vote on removing one article. Article 28 is an article that I have sponsored. This article would modify the town bylaw requiring a separate question and answer period, which I discussed previously. Although town council has advised that it would not be a conflict of interest for me to both present and preside over it, I have decided that I will recuse myself from this article, and I hope that you will vote to allow Michael McCall as temporary moderator for that one article. Out of regard for the presenters and your fellow town meeting reps, I must respectfully request that there be no conversations at your tables. If I can hear background discussions up here, it means that there may be reps who cannot hear the presentation, questions or answers or discussion. Thank you. Since our last town meeting, we lost a town meeting representative. Edwin Irwin from Precinct 2 passed away in February. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. We will now, I'm going to ask at this point for town meeting to vote on whether or not we will do what we did at our last session of the fall town meeting and dispense with the question and answer as a separate proceeding. So during discussion, you would ask your questions and answers just as you always could during discussion, but we just won't have a separate question and answer period. So do I hear a second to that motion? Thank you. All those in favor, just raise your chits. Okay, I rule that it has passed. So now, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening. town meeting representatives and those watching in the room and at home. Article 1 is the customary article at the front of every town meeting when we gather, and it's to hear reports of town officers and committees. And generally what we do with this article is we bring up topics of concern to the community which generally are not otherwise found on the town meeting warrant because they sort of foreshadow activities that may come at future town meetings. Or we report back on actions taken at previous town meetings. And in this case, we have some of both. So the first item under consideration of reports of town committees, our Public Works Director, Gary Persichetti, will give a report on the energy performance contract.
Good evening. Last year we came up and we gave you a breakdown of where we stood under the 26-month period of the construction of the performance contract with Johnson Controls. This is now the very first year. Sure, this is the very first year of it, so we're going to take you through it. On this page you'll see that in year 1, the total guaranteed savings should be $693,942. The cost avoidance that we were able to get was $731,970, which puts us $38,028 above the expected. So if you add that on to the 26-month period of the construction, our total cost avoidance year to date is $716,914. So we've had a good year with it. Just to take you through it quickly, the goals of the project was to reduce the energy costs, provide capital upgrades, standardize equipment, increase the energy efficiency and the reliability of the town's mechanical and electrical systems, and to maintain or increase occupancy, comfort, and well-being. JCI guaranteed savings from 25 energy conservation measures, including lighting fixtures, lighting controls, retrofits, weatherization, energy management system upgrades, solar PV, LED street lighting, VFDs, high-efficiency transformer, and water conservation. In the first year, as we said, a total measurement savings of $560 from the measured savings. We got $97,172 from the non-measured, and from the O&M, another $74,500 for a total first year of $731,970. And the next slides will just show you some of the 29, just to give you a couple, as I said, heating systems, building controls, lighting, vending machine, MISA controls, water conservation. And then the next slide, which I know is hard to see, what that does is that just shows you the avoidance by building and by the ECM, which is the energy conservation measure. And once again, it's just showing you the first year cost avoidance. And then just to give you some type of perspective on it, for the overall, meaning the town and schools, you can see that the renewable solar takes up 55% of that. Lighting is 10, heating is 3, cooling is 1, EMS is 12, street lights is 8, and water retrofit is 1, electrical is 5. So then we just break it down by school buildings, and you can see in school buildings, solar jumps up to 60, EMS jumps up to 15, heating stays at 3, lighting is 8, and water is 1. And then we break it down per the town building side, and you'll see that you have solar down to 39, street lights at 33%, lighting retrofit is 17, and then miscellaneous electrical is 1, building envelope is 4, heating's 3, cooling's 1, and water is 1. And then we just give you a breakdown of the solar PV. As you can see, that did extremely well. We ended up with 106% total overall. So we're up over almost 190,000. And then the last slide just gives you a chart that shows you the guaranteed savings, which is in the green, the projected, which is in the blue, and then the orange is the first year. And you can see, for the most part, other than the month of June and May, we've beat all of those. So once again, I just want to tell you we're very satisfied that we're able to pay the note and take in some extra money. Thank you.
The next report pertains to affordable housing, and it's over 10 years ago when I arrived at town meeting at the Board of Selectmen table, the town was wrestling with a 40B project known as Hillside Gardens. And I think it was before the Board of Selectmen for over a year at that time as they struggled and worked with David Hedison, the Housing Authority, in terms of how to approve a acceptable affordable housing project, dealing with the struggles of affordable housing. On the one hand, the challenges of how can people afford to live in the community as opposed to the demands it placed on the community in terms of the impact on neighborhoods and so forth. And at the time, it was sort of seen as that this 10% effort that the state requires, it just seemed to be an unattainable goal. Well, in the last year, it's been an extraordinary transformation in the housing market in the community, and it appears at this point that we will attain our 10% goal. As you can see by the slide, the affordable housing requirement is based on the decennial census. And back the 2010 census count was 13,741 year-round housing units. 10% of that is obviously 1,374. And the last up-to-date report on the state's website from Department of Housing and Community Development was the town had 1,169 units, or an 8.5% affordability factor. This is what's confronting the community right now. And again, it obviously not only deals with affordable housing, but it on the one hand, it provides opportunities for people children and others to come in and stay and live in their community, but also it's going to provide some demand on services, whether it be from education, public safety, solid waste removal. And so I really just wanted to give this one slide to let people know what's going on in the community and obviously be thinking in the back of our minds the challenges and perhaps the change in the dynamic of a part of the culture of the community in the years ahead, because you can see there's a phenomenal list of affordable housing projects for the community at this time. Most notable one, which was approved over a year ago, was 276 Mill Road, 108 rental affordable housing units. That project is now under construction. At 267 Littleton Road, 58 units. This is the second phase of the Chelmsford Housing Authority's project by the gas station. You recall the Chelmsford Woods project was approved with funding supported by this town meeting a few years back. The second phase, or the second half of the 58 units, will begin construction this summer, according to David Hedison. And at 241, just a little ways down the street from there, the property owners obtained approval for 20 rental affordable housing units. And in this case, rather than constructing affordable units on site in accordance with our zoning bylaw, they will make a payment of $260,000 in lieu of constructing the units in the development that would go into an affordable housing fund for the community to have at its disposal to support future affordable housing projects. The most current one is at 11 Cushing Place. Several months ago, the Planning Board approved a 54 rental unit affordable housing center in the center of the community behind Brick House Pizza. And again, in lieu of construction of affordable units in that 54 luxury market rate development that's proposed, they reached an agreement with the Planning Board for a $280,000 payment in lieu of payment to the Housing Fund. And currently, they're before the Board of Planning Board seeking approval for 16 additional on the top story of that building, and that hearing comes up in May. There has also been approved 243 Riverneck Road, 48 rental units, and 273 Riverneck Road, 16 owner-occupied units. That's been approved. It originally came in about 2 years ago as a group home with additional townhouses, and because of the inability for the project developer to get a group home license in the town of Chelmsford, it's now all townhomes. So those are the approved. What we have now is, recently in the last month, a project at 104 Turnpike Road with 168 rental units. has met with the planning board and indicate they'll be filing shortly. At 93 Brick Hill Road, 140 rental units. This is off of UPS Drive at the town line. They've met with the Housing Advisory Board with their plans that have informed us that they'll be submitting a application to Mass Housing for project eligibility. At 50 Hunt Road, at Hunt and Littleton Road, there's 84 rental units where you see those big dirt piles as you're at the traffic signal there. They've been approved by Mass Housing, and we're awaiting their submission. At 7 Gorham Street, 56 rental units have been submitted to Mass Housing for project eligibility. We expect that the Board of Selectmen will receive a letter within the next couple of weeks asking for comment on this project. And then you've got some smaller developments, 152 Turnpike Road for 8 to 10 owner units met with the planning board. 73 Dalton Road, 5 rental units awaiting submission. 61 Carlisle Road, 5 units met with the Housing Advisory Board. And 91 Billerica Road, 2 to 4 units met with the Housing Advisory Board. Again, these meetings are within the last several weeks. And then there's 2 big projects under consideration. We're in discussions, and it's a later regarding, and I'll have a quick report on this after this, regarding the UMass Lowell West Campus. That's a 35-acre parcel. About 20 units of it are developable, and it appears that that property will be disposed of by the university and the state within this calendar year, and the town is actively seeking to play a role in the development of that property. And again, it appears that the market for that is housing. And then finally, we've had communication with different boards regarding several parcels out at Groton Road for a potential large-scale housing and as well as a commercial development. So again, if you not take into consideration the UMass West Campus or the Groton Road, you're talking roughly 800 units. Now, we know from experience that not all of those developments will get constructed and may not all be approved. But I think it's reasonable to see that you would expect that there'll be several hundred of these, if not several hundreds of these units developed in the community. And again, we're mindful of that. We're in communication with the school department. In fact, our Community Development Director, Evan Blansky, will be appearing before the school committee to give them an update in the next few weeks. And we just wanted you as a community to be aware, because this is obviously a sea change. And again, it's not related or restricted to what's happening in Chelmsford. You're seeing this in Boston and in the metropolitan areas and in Lowell and so forth. We have a generation now where you have millennials seeking to not acquire or start a home, but seeking to be in the rental market. And then you have people at the other end of the housing spectrum, those who are seeking to exit the housing market and downsize, also looking at the rental market. So just wanted the board to be aware of this in our community, and obviously you're seeing it elsewhere. Many are aware that the units are under construction at the town line in Billerica, the 40B project there. You've seen the construction of the units in Westford at the town line off Littleton Road and so forth. So again, I thought it was just notable to take a few moments of your time, because obviously we'll see the implications of this at future town meetings, and obviously before the land use boards in our community. Regarding the UMass Lowell West Campus, again, this is a 35-acre parcel that is at 255 Princeton Street. We've been in meetings and discussions with the university officials for well over the past year. It's very clear that the parcel is not in the university's future development plans. As many of you know, the university is going through a major transformation. There was a story this past weekend about the new buildings that have gone up. West Campus is not in their future, but because it's an asset of the university, the Chancellor Maloney, as well as UMass President Marty Meehan, have indicated that they wish to dispose of the property, but also are seeking to get a return from that disposal back to the university. So we're working with officials from the governor's office and capital asset management and the university as part of the discussions on this, because it will require special legislation in order to direct those revenues back to the university. And we expect that legislation will be filed within the next few weeks and be enacted perhaps July or September timeframe. We've been in discussions as having the town be a role in the development of this. We've created a UMass Lowell West Campus Planning Task Force that has members. The chair is George Dixon. George Zaroulis, a planning board member, and others are on this committee to do visioning and to determine, what the destiny may be for the community. And obviously, if the town does play a role, we will seek state assistance in terms of financial support, as well as perhaps coming to town meeting for financial. I want to make it clear, we are not seeking to use this for municipal purposes. So it's not as though we're looking to acquire the 35 acres and to, construct ball fields or build a school or what have you. This is basically, we're trying to have an influence because we've been contacted, as you can imagine, from the abutters, and part of this task force was to put abutters who triangulate the property to have a say and a vision as to what may happen there. And so we will continue those efforts with, again, the guidance from the Board of Selectmen. And again, your town representatives will also be involved in this process when you're doing special legislation. No matter what the outcome, it appears that this transaction will be completed by the end of the calendar year. And even if the town chooses not to be a partner or have any active role, then what we anticipate is that the project will go out to private sale and private development. And so again, we will keep the community updated. Obviously, our primary forum is through the Board of Selectmen meetings and otherwise as to what's happening with that parcel. As you know, it's not every day that the town confronts a 35-acre parcel, of which 20 of it's developable, and we do know that there may be at least some efforts to preserve some of the land in its natural state, particularly the areas towards the front of the property. And then the last one, I want to remind the community, we've done this at a previous meeting, is back to the legislature. Our special legislation that was approved for the town of Chelmsford back in 1998 regarding the town's management and oversight of the Chelmsford Forum expires in just over a year. Under that legislation, the town has the option to purchase the property at the then appraised value for its directed use, which is as a forum, not at the market rate, which would be for that parcel, which, as you know, is located right off of the off-ramp at 129, and the building itself is in Billerica, and then a portion of the land is in Chelmsford. So we have, with the selectmen's support, we've completed an appraisal. We've directed town council to have discussions with state officials in terms of the transaction process, and we will be back to you certainly within the next 6 to 9 to 12 months with a decision for the community in terms of what would happen with that site. Same thing, something is going to happen, and we will have to decide whether the town wishes to exercise its options and rights. So with that, Mr. Moderator, I complete my reports under Article 1.
Well, let's go right to Article 2.
Okay. Article 2 is the amendments to the current fiscal year operating budget. So a year ago when we were here, we asked, and the voters supported a operating budget for the current fiscal year, which ends on June 30th in just a couple months. And when we went back to fall town meeting, we did not do any amendments to that budget. And so here we are, reality has happened. Like I said, we're well through the budget process, and a few, I think, rather extraordinary things have happened to us this year, which causes us to bring in a request, as you can see, that's almost $800,000 in adjustments to the budget. So we're seeking to transfer $436,800 from the General Stabilization Fund and $350,000 out of the $400,000 Finance Committee Reserve Fund to the following line items. Line item number 1, Municipal Administration Personnel, $30,000. Line item 5, Public Works Personnel Services, $8,000. Public Works Snow and Ice Removal, $300,000. Facilities Expenses, $116,000. Community Services Personnel Services, $7,800. And Benefits and Insurance Expenses, $325,000. To give you a little more detail, municipal administration, the $30,000 is primarily as a result of the activities in the town clerk's office pertaining to the early voting, the newly enacted state process that took place last November for early voting, which I think kudos and was a tremendous effort, and our experience was that it was widely accepted and appreciated and received. Like most things the state does, however, they didn't fully fund it. And so we acted within the parameters of the law, and we incurred additional costs to conduct what was a reasonable amount of early voting. I mean, the town clerk used great discretion. She chose not to open on Sundays or go, with too many extensive efforts that you would have seen in a more urbanized area, but did adhere to the spirit of the law and for that process. We also had a staff turnover in the clerk's office, which again, with the salary exchange, because when we do our budgets, we budget unknown, and you'll see this come up repeatedly in a couple of these adjustments. And again, just the process. And there's the next one. In Public Works Personnel Services, we had an unforeseen early retirement in which an employee, a long-term employee of well over 20 years with the community, came in and with 4 days' notice said, "I'm through with the highway, snow and ice operations. I'm leaving." And again, that creates a burden on us in terms of we have to pay him, an employee of that nature, their accrued vacation time as well as cover for that because of the staffing requirements in that portion of the year. And then obviously the big one was snow and ice removal. We had a great start to the winter. Again, however, unlike last year, it had a very rough finish. We obviously experienced a greater than above normal snowfall and snow and icing operations. So we budget for a normal, traditional, average snow and ice year operation, but our expenses for salt, equipment repair, and contractors rendered us $300,000 over appropriation. And the municipal facilities expenses, we were over considerably. Many of you are aware of the issues that we've had in maintaining and operating the HVAC systems in the Chelmsford Public Schools. We also had the challenges of the Flint, Michigan lead water issue that the Commonwealth came in and immediately, in response to that crisis, required testing and compliance. Obviously, the issues we found were in our oldest school, the McCarthy School. We didn't have an issue with the pipes, but we had issues with the actual unit fountains in the buildings. They had to be replaced. So we replaced those at a cost of $30,000 as a public health demand and requirement for the students there. And you can see additional costs were incurred in terms of HVAC, an independent third-party assessment, which will come up under a later article at tonight's meeting, additional on-site support for HVAC activities, pump installation and installation of a mini split system at the high school, as well as, again, activities that were at the South Row School with the steam-based heating system that's there. And we also, again, had to deal with backflow prevention and water main meter at the Parker School. Similar situation in the community services, personnel services. We had a unforeseen retirement. In municipal government, there's only mandatory retirement for public safety at age 65. So when you have a long-term employee, it's unclear when they will go, and really they generally let us know. But we again, when we were here a year ago, we were not aware of that. And in this case, we'll recognize him because he has been recognized, but this was Richard Day. Richard Day, again, retired recently with over 40 years of service to the community. And again, we created an adjustment and a situation in the Board of Health office. And again, you know, we did have staff exchange and so forth, but the net outcome of that was a $7,800 charge that we had to address in the budget. And then lastly, and probably of most concern, is benefits and insurance expenses. And this is the first time in the 12 town meetings that I've been at, and I hope it doesn't come very often, but we had an extraordinary increase in enrollment in benefits and insurance. And again, when we were here a year ago, we budgeted on our latest census numbers and anticipated the additional custodians that were going to be hired in the schools, and we anticipate the notices were given for, you know, for attrition in terms of retirements in the school system and so forth. But we think perhaps a couple of things are taking into place, and they're probably driven by the national and level in terms of health care and the requirement under the Affordable Care Act that people obtain health insurance, and you get these requirements showing coverage, as well as the change in the private sector market having to deal with the reduction in benefits. And us as a community, we have adjusted our benefits, and again, we did it this past spring. But I think even though our benefits are at the benchmark state level in terms of, you know, resulting basically in higher co-payments and deductibles, that still state benchmark it appears to still be more generous than the private sector. So with that as intro, I'm going to turn the remainder of this presentation on the benefits and insurance over to John Souza, our finance director. John, as treasurer, tracks this budget monthly and can give a little more detail as to what's transpired here. John?
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening. Each year when we develop the health insurance budget, we go back in time, we're back in November, December, and we're making a projection out for about a budget that's going to start about 6 months from where we are at that time. What we do is we base it on the current number of subscribers, both active employees and retirees. We also factor in an increase for premiums, and we also factor in an increase for new enrollees, both active and active employees and retirees. This year we ran into a trend that we haven't seen before that's necessitated the budget transfer. As you can see on the slide, for the number of active employees during fiscal year 17, we had a net increase of 27, 2 in general government departments and 25 in the school department. We also had a net increase of 24 retirees. And during the year, this is a simplified slide. We often have people moving in and out of plans, changing coverage, etc. But because this is about double the number of new enrollees or new subscribers that we had the prior year, that's what necessitated this increase. So when there are a number of plans. Certainly an individual plan is a lot less expensive for the town than a family plan, of course. So there's a number of factors that go into it. But when we did the projection out to get through the end of this year, because of this increase in subscribers, we'll need a request of $325,000 due to these additional subscribers.
Are you done? Okay. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? And does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Couldn't hear you, Pat. Try it again.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Thank you. Okay, now's the opportunity for people to make inquiry or discuss as they deem fit.
France Precinct 6. Paul, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how the effect of all of this article and a later article on the stabilization fund. It looks like this town meeting, these two articles would reduce the stabilization fund by over $700,000. And having watched your meeting last Thursday night, it appears that we may not have that much to put back in the fall. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. We had a discussion at a joint meeting last Thursday evening between the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and School Committee, and our town accountant, Darlene Lucia, gave a detailed report. The good news is we're going to finish the year in the black, meaning that at the end of the year, our total revenues versus our total expenditures, even with these adjustments, will finish in the black. However, unlike what we've seen in recent years, there will not be a lot left over. We'll be expending over $700,000 at this town meeting for the adjustments, as well as a few other articles upcoming, and we would anticipate that the free cash certified for the closeout of the fiscal year will be roughly around $1 million. What they said, this was one of those years we just didn't catch any break. Snow and ice was over, benefits and insurance was over. There really weren't any areas where things sort of broke the other way in terms of activities coming back. We gave the report the other evening. Our tax collection revenues are at target. State aid, again, is at target, what the state promised us. Local receipts, we've sort of passed the peak of motor vehicle excise tax sales. That represents roughly 40%. I'm sorry, over 40%, almost 50% of our local receipts, roughly $5 million. We've seen the recent commitments come in from the state are decreasing, and if any of you have followed the market, you know that the car sales have slowed, and in fact some of the manufacturers are talking about some reduction in some of the production lines. And so again, that tends to be cyclical, and again, we've passed the peak of that cyclical basis as well. And so again, there just hasn't been any extraordinary, and I think but for the conservative budget practices that we have as a community, in terms of as we make these forecasts, as John described earlier, we're budgeting out for a period that's going to begin in a few months and then go for a 12-month period after that. In this case, like I said, it'll pretty much be a wash are just slight to the positive at the end of this fiscal year.
Beth Logan, Precinct 3. Regarding the benefits, I'm wondering what % of school and town employees are actually using our health benefits now? So that, I mean, I'm just kind of mentally trying to figure out what the max cap will be if this keeps happening year in and year out.
Well, we're roughly about 2/3 of our employees utilize the benefits available to the community. You'll see later on in the presentation, the number of employees have pretty much stayed static. But roughly, it's a benefit that's availed by two-thirds of them. And in terms of the contributions, so that's sort of the next question comes out of this. The town contributes 75% of the premium for an active HMO plan for active employees and 63% for retirees. And when you're looking at those numbers, I mean, the policies themselves for an HMO plan is over $20,000. So the town share is over $15,000, almost $16,000, and that's going up another 7% this upcoming year. So that's why we're very mindful and we follow these numbers. And so when you hire an employee, it's not just, well, what's the $40,000 salary for X employee? You're also coming in generally with a $20,000 benefit package. And again, that's not unique to municipal government or to the town. It's also the drag on the economy and in society as general in terms of industry. And again, the big concern is how, and not, again, it's not a Chelmsford concern solely, but a national concern and probably even international, is this whole idea of wrestling with healthcare costs. So again, as I mentioned earlier, our benefit plan, we've continued the shift in terms of co-payments and deductibles, which is a fancy way of saying the employees and retirees are paying more. But obviously, it doesn't go to the level of the extremes of what you see out there in the market.
Moderator. Good evening, Mr. Cohen. My question is on the snow and ice removal line item budget of $300,000. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, do you know what amount is attributable to the contractors out of that line item?
Sure, we do. Yes, we do. Most of the number is actually salt, believe it or not. The most of the overrun is an area of salt for de-icing, and so I'll take this as they're assembling that number. What you've seen is a dramatic change, and again, not just in Chelmsford, but also across the state. What you see now is the pre-treatment for roads. So when you'll see them on the highways and other communities, that before the storm actually starts, they're out pre-treating with the application of materials, and then the actual salt itself is expensive, and so that accounts for roughly 2/3 of that number, and then 15,000 is the overrun for contractors. One of the challenges, and you say, well, why is it only 15? We, and I'd say not just Chelmsford, but municipalities are having a very difficult time getting contractors to do snow and ice removal operations. And we think it's a combination of a couple reasons. One is it's not pleasant work in terms of the demand upon hours and so forth, in terms of you're at the call of the community, in terms of when you come in and when you're able to leave. And then second of all, contractors can make more money doing parking lots and individual driveways, if you think about what the cost is, than the hourly rate that they're out there working for a city or town. And so the combination of those activities have led to a shortage in the greater Lowell area, and we think even greater, but we talked to our fellow communities, that's been the issue. So it wasn't tremendously over in terms of contractors because we weren't able to hire as many contractors as we wish to have hired, which unfortunately led to further delay in de-icing operations.
Right. Yeah, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is because there was a lot of inconsistency in the snow removal this year. Sometimes we'd have the guys come by, it was less than 1/4 of an inch. Yep. And then other times it'd be well over 6 inches and there's nobody coming down the road to plow the road. So exactly. I just want to get a handle on that. And Mr. Moderator, I was wondering, can I make a comment on Article 1? Concerning the reports? Is it appropriate?
Is it going to be a lengthy comment?
No. No?
Then go ahead.
Okay. I just want to remind everybody that the 8.5% of the affordable housing is not a solid number. It's a fluid number. It changes depending upon the subsidized housing inventory, which can change from year to year depending upon when the original buildings were built, if those that were approved actually get built, and a lot of other things. And especially with private developer projects, in 30 years, all that subsidized housing inventory gets turned over to the private developers in total.
That's not
So we lose
No, I'm not
that
sure.
inventory.
I'm not sure that that's accurate.
That's not accurate.
I think we're getting too far afield now,
Okay.
and I understand your point regarding percentages being fluid.
I just want to make that comment, and I thank you for allowing me to do so. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
You're welcome.
Claire Janot, Precinct 7. My question is on the benefits and insurance expense, and it's more one of timing. I understand the problem and how fast the dollars mount up. 25 FTEs added on for the schools is a little surprising to me, and I'm wondering, do we have a, I don't think we added 25 positions in the schools, so I'm assuming these are people with qualifying events, or do we have an open enrollment period that limits when people can get on our plan? Thank you.
We have open enrollment at the end of April and the open fair, and then the open enrollment is every May. But what this was a combination of two things. There were some additional employees added to the schools, and they had to deal with special education demands. There were additional aides and instructors hired, but also there were people coming into the plan as well as qualifying events during the course of the year. So it's the combination of all those factors that led to that amount of increase.
Do you have any sense of how many of it's new hires versus?
I think it was about half, I think was the sense that we had.
Those are usually planned in the budget, aren't they?
Well, they are, but and again, you'll see in the budget document that's in the yellow book this evening, you see the FTE equivalents. And what we've seen is we look at this year's versus the one book we had a year ago, there are more FTEs. So again, what happens is you got increased demand, particularly in the area of special education services, that the additional aides and hours come in. And again, we have to be mindful because we have to track the hours, and as I know you're in the industry, and I just explained this to the voters.
Yeah, I'm well aware.
That if somebody crosses the threshold of hours, then you have to offer them the benefits. And so we're mindful, particularly in activities such as the library and in the schools, we have a number of part-time employees, substitute teachers and so forth. We have to be mindful of the hours that are being worked.
Or you start using them for a part-time person for another function,
Right.
and next thing you
Exactly.
know, they're
Their
qualifying for health insurance. So
Exactly.
I guess my general comment is it's really got to be managed because we plan these personnel in the budget and we have to plan the health insurance along with them. It's too expensive. Thanks.
Anyone else wish to inquire or discuss? If not, this article requires a 2/3 vote, so please pick up your voting devices. And a yes is to approve this appropriation, and a no is not to.
And so we have a fairly protracted debate on what should, I think, have been a fairly quick discussion involving additions to the operating budget for fiscal 17. That's the one that we're currently about to wrap up. If this is an indication of how the budgetary discussion for fiscal 2018 is going to go, I think we are definitely in for a long night.
Okay, the article passes. 136 voted in favor, 4 opposed, and no abstentions. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Article 3 pertains to the town's assessment for the Neshoba Valley Technical School District for the upcoming fiscal year 2017-2018. And what I'm seeking a motion from the community is that the town raise and appropriate the requested amount from the district of $2,897,511 to fund the town's fiscal year 2018 assessment to the Neshoba Valley Technical School District. And I'm going to turn the podium over to Superintendent of Schools Denise Pidgeon and Business Manager Jean Savoy for their presentation.
Good evening. Again, my name is Denise Pigeon, and I am the superintendent of Neshoba Valley Technical School District. With me this evening from the school administration is Jeannie Savoy, our business manager, as well as Paul Jassoum, our vocational coordinator. We also have Kyla Callahan, our coordinator of student services, and Dr. Carol Heidenrich, our director of technology. We also have another team that's actually over in Groton right now for their annual town meeting as well. I'd first like to just point out that Neshoba Tech is governed by a 14-member school committee board, and I'd like to take a moment to thank our members from Chelmsford that serve on our committee. Our current members of the school committee are Maria Carafellis, Lawrence MacDonald, Donald Ayer, and Mr. Richard DeFreitas also serves as our alternate. I would also like to take a moment to thank Mr. Samuel Polton, who had served on our school committee for the last 25 years. Thank you. We also have several students that serve as representatives to our school committee. This year we have 3 outstanding students that meet with the school committee monthly and give updates on student life. First, we have Bryson Tang from the town of Pepperell. He is in our Engineering Academy program. He's also our current valedictorian for the senior class. We also have Rihanna Early in our TV Media Theater Arts program. She was a student from Chelmsford, but she's recently moved to Ayer. And Andrew Putri from Ayer, also in our Engineering Academy program. Just a quick overview of our school offerings. As you know, we offer career and technical programming in 20 different technical areas. In addition, we have a full academic program. We are located in the town of Westford. We serve 8 district towns. Our 8 district towns are Ayer, Chelmsford, Littleton, Groton, Pepperell, Shirley, Townsend, and Westford. Before we get into the specifics about our school budget, I think it's really important for you to understand the success of your school districts. At Neshoba Tech, we're very proud to share with you that we continue to be a level 1 school district, which is the highest accountability measure that a high school can have. In addition, we have above the state average performance on student attendance, graduation rates, Mass Core completion rates, which is completion of a rigorous course of study. We also have high school placement rates of over 97%. Technical schools are required to conduct a 1-year follow-up study after students graduate from high school, and we're proud that annually over 97% of our students are either actively working in their field or they are participating in some type of post-secondary education. As I mentioned before, we do have 8 district towns. This pie chart represents the breakdown of our district enrollment. As you can see, Chelmsford makes up the largest portion of our student population. We currently have 191 students from the town of Chelmsford attending our high school. The second largest is the town of Pepperell, just behind Chelmsford. This chart represents a 20-year enrollment trend. As you can see, after the building project in 2004-2005, we have been steadily climbing in enrollment, and the last couple of years we have leveled off in enrollment. A quick year in review. Last year, when I met before this town meeting, I was very pleased to share with you that we had received a competitive grant in the amount of $500,000 for the Workforce Skills Capital Grant Program. That funding went towards our machine tool technology program. We spent the spring implementing that, and I do have some photos to share with you in the next slide. In addition, we were in year 2 of fine arts and dance, along with implementing our biotechnology program and our veterinary assisting program. We were in year 3 of our one-to-one Chromebook initiative, and we continue to work on our early college options for students. These next photos are of the grand reopening. Again, through the $500,000 Workforce Skills Capital Grant, we were able to completely refurbish our machine tool technology program and reopen this August as advanced manufacturing. We were able to purchase brand new equipment, which included CNC machines, manual machines, turning machines, grinders, quite a bit of equipment for the students. In addition, we were able to refurbish the space with some new flooring and paint. It's absolutely beautiful. If you've not had a chance to see it, I would encourage you to schedule a time to come and view the program. In addition, we had several other capital projects that we implemented. These are some photographs of our automotive collision repair or auto body program. This is a picture of the new spray booth. It is actually larger than the spray booth that was in there previously. We would encourage the town to consider utilizing this program for projects for perhaps the police department or the fire department or any other vehicle painting needs you may have. We were also fortunate to be able to renovate in our early learning center. On our property, in the back of our property, we do have a small house, and that house has been repurposed for our high school early childhood education program, where we train high school students for careers in early learning. We also enroll preschool and toddler students as part of that program. So we were able to renovate this area. We replaced the floors, we replaced the ceiling, and we put in a nice fresh coat of paint. And there's some photographs of that project. Recently, we completed our NEASC accreditation visit, and one of the commendations that came out of that recent visit is how Neshoba has been very successful in seeking competitive grants to help offset the costs of vocational education. We're well aware that equipment costs are quite expensive. We have been very aggressive in seeking opportunities of grant funding in a competitive nature, and you can see over the last several years we have received over $800,000 in competitive grants through the Massachusetts Life Science Center, as well as the Workforce Skills Capital Grant Program. Also very pleased to share, and very surprised, we were chosen again to receive a second $500,000 Workforce Skills Capital Grant. Another competitive grant. There were over 64 applications, and we were one of 30 to be selected. The funding for this grant will be going towards our Engineering Academy and Robotics program. We will be able to completely refurbish and renovate in our Engineering Academy program and implement collaborative robots into our robotics program. We've actually already begun the process of this, and we will be hoping to finish this project in June or July, and we will be inviting you hopefully to a grand reopening in August. The next several slides will give you an overview of our FY18 budget. I'll talk to you a little bit about the budget process. I'll talk to you about the overall budget, review some of the capital projects that we have on the books, our financial plan, our OPEB liability, and our plan for funding OPEB, and lastly, our FY18 assessments to the towns. This next slide is an overview of our FY18 budget. Our budget development process begins quite early, actually, in the month of October, with work at the department level. The departments begin at the ground level building the budgets. They share it with the administration. The administration then shares it with our budget subcommittee, which is a subcommittee, again, of our 14-member school committee. There's quite a bit of back and forth through the months of October and November, and a proposed budget goes forward to the full school committee, and it must be done 45 days prior to the first town meeting. Our first town meeting is actually in the town of Westford, which is held in March, and you'll be pleased to know that Westford has passed the assessment. This overview does show the breakdown of the overall budget. Our total budget for Neshoba Valley Technical High School is $14,081,925, which is a 3.3% overall increase. This slide also does note some of the major budget increases and decreases. The major increases, again, are contractual expenses that are anticipated. We also had some movement where we reclassed a few staff members from one line to a different line to better reflect their actual job requirements and the job functions. And we also had some favorable outcomes in the budget. For example, we were able to negotiate a very favorable contract for heat, and we were quite pleased. This next slide is an overview of our 5-year capital plan. Again, as part of the assessment, we do have to manage our capital costs for our school district. It is not a separate warrant article at town meeting, so we build this right into the budget process. We try to maintain a 5-year capital project plan, one that maintains costs. This year we are seeking $200,000 for capital expenses. We are in need of replacing our analog phone system. It's quite outdated, and we hope to do that this summer. We will also be repairing flooring in auto body and auto tech, both floors which are original to the school, and painting in those classroom areas. I also want to draw your attention to the proposed 2023 and beyond. There are a few larger expenses that will be coming before town meeting in the coming years, one of which is the re-roofing of the final pieces of the school that have not yet been re-roofed. Our goal will be to time an MSBA project with paying off the current MSBA program that we're under for the current roof project that we have, so that the cost to the towns would not be exorbitant. This next slide is the FY18 financial plan. The first part of the slide shows you our revenue sources, the first and the largest being the district town assessments in the total of $8,845,877. So all of the town assessments make up this revenue. In addition, our anticipated state transportation reimbursement and our Chapter 70 school aid. In addition to that, to fund this budget, we will be putting in our full E&D amount of $667,101. In addition, we'll be using approximately $825,765 in our school choice funding to balance this budget. About halfway down the slide, I want to just take a few minutes to talk about two of our other accounts. One is the other post-employment benefits account, and the other is stabilization. As you know, in FY12, we had a vote at town meeting to establish a stabilization fund, and over the past several years, we have funded that account. I'm pleased to share that we have $1.4 million in that account, which is set aside for major capital expenses that may be needed for the school district. The school committee has voted to hold off on further funding of stabilization at this time and to focus our attention on our OPEB account. Neshoba Tech's OPEB liability is about $7.7 million at this point, and as you know, it's a bit of a moving target. We are proposing funding OPEB at $300,000. This is a recommendation of our OPEB trust as well as our school committee. I also want to just take a quick moment to thank Mr. Cohen, who actually serves on Neshoba Tech's OPEB trust fund committee. And if we are able to focus on OPEB of this nature, this would be a 25 to a 30-year plan for funding our OPEB liability. This next slide is the breakdown of district town assessments, and it does show the student population by town. It shows the town's minimum required contribution. Again, the town's minimum required contribution is set by a formula that's determined by the state. It does have to do with enrollment as well as wealth factor of the town. There's also a breakdown of the increase to minimum contribution, capital equipment breakdown, transportation breakdown. I want to take just a quick moment to talk about net school spending. I know for several years, Neshoba Tech did have some difficulty meeting net school spending. In fact, in FY12, FY13, and I believe FY14 as well, Neshoba Tech actually did not meet net school spending and actually was penalized. Because of the willingness of the towns to increase over minimum, I'm pleased to share with you that last year we did meet net school spending, and we are on track to meet net school spending again this year as well. I also like to take a moment to just talk about community service projects. Again, this is one way that we can really give back to the town. It's a win-win for the town. It gets some great work done for the town while providing a real-world opportunity for students. These are some photographs of some recent projects that we have done in the town of Chelmsford. There's a planning desk and in a case that was done for the fire department. In addition, I heard today as I walked in that many people were able to enjoy the beautiful porch out front on this beautiful day. Projects like these are, again, beneficial for the town, beneficial for students, so we are always interested in seeking additional ideas for projects such as this. In closing, I just want to take a few minutes of your time to talk specifically about the students of Chelmsford that are at Neshoba Tech. As you know, we have 191 amazing individuals that attend our school. I can't talk about all of them, but I do want to point out just a few. For example, you may know that our school district, we participate in what's called Skills USA. Skills USA is a program that brings together parents, students, members from industry, and it brings students from career and technical education together to compete at the local level, the district level, the state level, the national level. Recently, we had two students, both from Chelmsford, that placed in Skills USA, and that is Shelby O'Rourke and James Lesotho. They scored a silver medal in TV media theater arts production. In addition, James also earned an honorable mention for a burn prevention video that he created as part of his technical program in a program that was sponsored by Shriners. I also want to talk a little bit about Margaret Meskel, another amazing young lady at Neshoba Tech. She is also a senior in our TV Media Theater Arts program. She recently won a TAMI, which is a high school theater arts award, and the award was called Not Your Average Chorus Member. And she's an amazing young lady. She is working on her senior capstone project right now. She is actually recording an a cappella mini album, and she is recording all of the different voices for that album. And lastly, I just want to point out another fine young man at our school, Charles Clark, also from Chelmsford, is in our engineering academy. For his senior capstone project, he's actually designing an airplane. Had a chance to walk through that department the other day. Amazing work that this young man is doing. In addition, he was also one of the students that was featured in the Lowell Sun as part of the design team between engineering and vet assisting that designed the wheelchair for a paralyzed bunny in a project with Angel at Neshoba. So again, many fine students at Neshoba from Chelmsford. I just wanted to point out some recent accomplishments from some of them. In closing, I would just like to thank all that have been involved in the budget development process. I'm grateful to have worked with so many that work so hard to provide high-quality technical education for our students. I'd also like to extend an open invitation to the members of the town representatives for Chelmsford. If you've not had a chance to see Neshoba Tech in action, or have not had a chance to come inside our building and see what we do and the type of education we have to offer, please contact my office. We give tours on a regular basis, and I would be more than happy to bring you around and show you all about Neshoba Tech and what we do there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 3 with one abstention.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Thank you. This is an opportunity for inquiry or debate, discussion.
Beth Logan, Precinct 3. So I've been doing this for years, and I think I learned something new tonight. Do I understand it correctly that your budget includes the benefits like health insurance, but our Chelmsford Chelmsford school budget, those show up for, and I should say, Mr. Moderator, I don't know who to direct this to, our own school, Chelmsford school system, that health insurance is not in the school budget, but is in the town budget. So therefore, when we do a cost per student, it's not really apples to apples?
That's correct.
No, well,
That's correct. Well,
if I may.
We may have two decisions on this one.
The Neshoba Valley Regional School District is a separate municipal governmental entity, much like the water districts in Chelmsford. So therefore, they, as a standalone entity, have to provide all their costs, administrative, benefits, and so forth. The Chelmsford Public Schools, the school department, is a departmental entity of the town of Chelmsford, even though they have much autonomy under state law. However, in terms of the issue of spending, both departments, both the Neshoba School District and the Chelmsford Public Schools, submit to the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services, and Department of Education end-of-year reports regarding actual expenditures. And so therefore, on the district side, it's their entire district operations, from administration, benefits, and so forth. On the school department side, within a community, they spend the operating budget as well as their indirect costs, such as health insurance, debt service, all the support services from the town. That all gets filtered into the state. So therefore, the numbers you see on the state's website for net school spending and district expenditures in terms of required district school spending, compliance with the state requirements for minimum school spending, those are apples to apples because they do reflect the total cost of education. The difference is, as you said, is how we appropriate it within a town. But when you look at state numbers in terms of per pupil expenditures and total school expenditure costs, those are uniform across the Commonwealth, whether you're a regional district, a vocational district, or an individual town school department.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. My only other comment is usually I get up here and I ask what they're doing to save money, and I just want to say that this year it sounds like they've actually explained that, and I'm appreciative that they're only going up by 3.3%, which I think is one of the lowest raises in several years. So for all my years of complaining, I figured I deserved to give them kudos.
Okay, thank you.
Mary France, Precinct 6, and I think I'm up here for the same reason as Beth's last comment. As a longtime critic of Neshoba, the days I sat on the school committee, I'm impressed with what you've done this year in terms of the budget. And I will just note that the state's required minimum contribution from Chelmsford goes up by $90,000. What Neshoba is asking from us is only going up by $60,000, which means there's a difference of $30,000. So someplace the expenses, I think, in those other items, transportation, debt service, et cetera, we are actually going down in our contribution. And I certainly appreciate that. And we have more numbers in the budget. I hope everyone appreciates that. And thank you to Denise and your current staff for the work you've done on this year's budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Dubinsky, Precinct 2. There's probably an obvious answer to this, and I have jet lag, so I just need a little help with this. I just did a quick down and dirty cost per pupil, not relative or in comparison to Chelmsford Public Schools, but relative to this particular slide. So why is there a cost per pupil in Chelmsford of $15,117, and yet in the next two highest enrollment towns, which would be Pepperell and Townsend, those numbers come in at 11,375 and 11,149 respectively. Can you clarify that for me, please?
I can. When you do the quick math on that, what is not apparent is some of the factors in the formula that make up the minimum town's contribution. So the formula from the state actually also incorporates a town's ability to pay, and certain towns may have a different ability to pay, and that factors into the formula differently, which would affect the per pupil expenses by town.
So what if the individual doesn't have the ability to pay? No, I'm only kidding. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? There being none, please pick up your voting devices. And again, a yes vote is to approve the appropriation, and no vote is to oppose it, and an abstention says you're not saying anything about it.
For those who've been longtime viewers of town meeting, you are certainly aware that the atmosphere involving Neshoba Tech has not always been cordial and as positive as you heard tonight. And kudos go to the superintendent for having prepared adequately the budget details that town meeting members have come to expect and
the article
and are good
passes
to
unanimously, 144
you can see that
in favor.
reflected in the overwhelmingly positive vote that you just saw on the screen.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 4 is the requested appropriation to fund the Chelmsford Public Schools operations for the upcoming fiscal year. The request that I'm recommending to town meeting and the motion before you is to raise and appropriate $57 million for the school's operations for the current fiscal year. I'm going to turn the podium over to Dr. Lang, our superintendent of schools, but I just want to point out something, because in the past week, and we had a tri-board meeting this past Thursday evening between the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and School Committee, where we considered the school's budget as well as a few other articles as we were approaching town meeting. And there was a discussion there in terms of the support within the school committee for the budget. And it was raised and it was reported in the media that the school committee would split vote 3-2 on the school budget. But I think what needs to be made clear, and why I mention this, because I think it will help shape the debate and the understanding, is under Mass General Law, the town meeting provides the total funding amount for the school department's operations. The town meeting does not determine how the school expends money within that funding amount. And it was made clear and clarified last Thursday evening that the school committee was unanimous, 5-0, on supporting the funding amount of $57 million to defray the operating charges for the Chelmsford Public Schools for the upcoming fiscal year. With that, I'll turn the podium over to Dr. Lang.
Good evening, everyone. Before you this evening, I'm going to review the Chelmsford Public Schools recommended budget for fiscal 18, which is before you. Just a slide to give a recap of our existing funding for the current fiscal year. And the current appropriation stands at $54.5 million. Both Town Manager Cohen and then the Chelmsford School Committee are recommending an appropriation of $57 million, which is a $2.45 million increase over fiscal 17 funding. Back in March, if you've been following the school committee's budget process and deliberations, I presented a preliminary budget to the school committee, which totaled $57.4 million. Just about a week and a half or so ago, we received the final budget figure, which was the contract for our regular education student transportation services. Our current contract is up June 30th. We need to enter into a new contract for next year, and we needed to know what that dollar amount was. That was the final piece of the fiscal 18 budget. And that came in a net $100,000 increase over what I had included in the budget document. So the budget document that I presented to the school committee on March 1st totaled $57.4 million. When you add the extra $100,000, it was $57.5 million is what the school committee was deliberating and discussing a week ago Thursday, if you were following that process. What I'm going to outline for you today is basically some of the, we call them budget drivers, or some of the budget increases that are included within the budget next year that are making it go up to $2.45 million. And then the very last slide, I'm going to show you the budget reductions that the school committee made, approximately $500,000 worth of budget reductions to bring it in line with the $57 million recommendation of the town manager, which ultimately the school committee is recommending your support. Within the budget document, we've accounted for all known step increases in the budget. So these are various staff in the district that might move from step 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 based on years of service or longevity within the school department. That adds $629,000 to our base budget. Additionally, what we term as lane changes, or if people move from one degree to another degree, the horizontal movement within the salary grids adds another $147,000 to the budget. Lastly, we do still have a provision within our contract that requires, if you provide notice that you're going to be leaving the district, some type of a buyback benefit for sick and vacation time, and that added $55,000 to the budget. One of the significant cost increases for next year is special education tuition and services. So we're estimating, based on our current enrollment of known students that we have in the district, taking into consideration the placements that they're going to be in next year that we already know about, is adding about $400,000 to the bottom line of next year's budget. Now, this year we actually saw a number of students move into the district, and we had some of our own students go to different placements within the district that did add some cost in fiscal 17. And we had reserves through the circuit breaker fund to be able to pay for and offset those funds within our fiscal 17 budget, so we didn't have to come back and ask for additional funds. We're managing that within our own budget. But what that means is next year we have less circuit breaker funding available to be able to offset those costs in 18. So technically, you're seeing an $800,000 net increase due to special education tuition and services for our students. $400 in actual, and then $400 because we have less revenue to offset. Within the budget as well, the school committee is currently negotiating contracts with all of our different employee bargaining groups. And as the town manager indicated earlier, and I think we'll be discussing later, within the school department budget, we actually have a line item for salary increases based on the negotiations that come out. In the town budget, that doesn't happen. The money is in the stabilization fund and then would get voted at a later time after the contracts are ratified. Within the school department's budget, we actually incorporate the known dollar amount that we're negotiating with as a line item in the budget. So if you recall, we did the same thing last year within our budget, and we had a line item of $800,000, which accounted for a 2% cost of living increase for all of our different employee bargaining groups. A couple of our contracts have settled already, and we know what those costs are, so those have already been built into the staff salary book, which is at the back of the budget document, and that added up to about $83,000. But for our contracts which have not settled yet, the value of a 2% cost of living increase is $735,000. You'll note it's less than the $800 from last year because we've already accounted for the contracts which we've settled, and we know what those cost increases are. But that's another significant budget driver within our budget. This is a small slide, and I apologize for that. One of the things that we have implemented and incorporated into our budget is full-day kindergarten for the fall. So that is something that the school committee and the administration has been working on for a number of years. I know town meeting has been very supportive to us over the last year and a half or so as we've worked on our facility assessment and trying to prepare for this. So I'm very happy to say that we actually will be implementing, and the costs have been included in the fiscal 18 budget document, full-day kindergarten for the fall. We've incorporated salaries for 10 additional individual teachers within the budget. At this point in time, we're posting, and we're going to hire for 8 of those teachers, 2 at each additional school. But we've allowed ourselves a little bit of wiggle room because we're seeing a higher than anticipated interest and enrollment in the full-day kindergarten for the fall. And we didn't want to be in this position come May or June and have unreasonably high class sizes for those Ks. We wanted to have a little bit of kind of swing space within the budget for that. If we do not end up needing to utilize the extra 2 kindergarten teachers which have been budgeted, the school committee would then reallocate those funds within their budget to other budget priorities. But at this point in time, we're moving forward to post 8 and actually hire 8 additional kindergarten teachers. That is included within the budget. Also, the costs of some additional assistance for those kindergarten students and some of our elementary school students, lunch and recess aides, as well as, we've started construction. Last week was a big week for us at several of the schools, Center Elementary School and Byham in particular. Had a lot of site work going on for the new modular school buildings that are being constructed over the course of the summer. The foundations were poured over at Center School. That's coming along quite well. Byham, they were doing a lot of site preparation. So we're in full swing as far as that is concerned. One of the things that we do need to account for is the extra cost of cleaning the new facilities when they're in. So those costs have been incorporated into this budget. That's a known number. The contractors that we're currently contracting with to provide our cleaning services have basically agreed to extend their contracted square footage cost to cover the extra space in those modular buildings. So those costs have all been incorporated into this budget document. We have had to add over the course of this year, because of some different students who have actually moved into the district that have different requirements, we've had to add 5 paraprofessional positions to our existing budget. They've come on at different points during the year, and we're able to incorporate those costs into our existing structure, so we're not at a deficit for those funds. But that's why you will see on the FTE page 5 additional paraprofessional positions incorporated in the budget. And we are incorporating 1 additional speech-language pathologist. We have an increasing population at the elementary school levels that is now moving up to the middle school levels. And both at McCarthy and Parker, we're experiencing higher demand than has been witnessed in the past as far as speech services for our students that are all called out within their individual education plans. So the cost of an additional speech-language pathologist or speech therapist is incorporated within the budget that's before you. One significant, and this actually had been a request, both of the school committee, the administration have been dealing with this for a number of years, and then parents, if you talk to within the community. A general frustration with some of the way that we're doing transportation within the public schools, and not the best customer service, quite honestly, when parents or students are having issues as far as trying to triage and work through with the transportation company improvements to those. So one of the things that we currently have now is we have 2 of our staff at central office were stipended to help coordinate the transportation program. We're recommending that an additional position or a new position at central office at a net increase of $23,000 to the budget be added. It'll then be combined with the stipends that already existed within the budget to have a dedicated transportation coordinator for the school department. That individual will actually help with all of the routing and scheduling of the buses. If parents or constituents are having any issues with bus routes or student transportation, they'll be able to call that one individual who will be able to actually help them and assist them to make the necessary changes that can occur right over the phone, as opposed to having to go to the transportation company and come back and forth and try to work through those changes. So that is a new position within our budget. Again, it's a net increase of $23,000, combination of a couple of stipended positions that will go away once we move to that model. But we think the service is going to improve vastly, and it's also going to give us some additional controls over our transportation scheduling and routing, which we don't currently have. Right now, the bus company that we contract with dictates the schedules to us. We'll be able to actually take that control back, and will in turn create the schedules. We may find some operating efficiencies, and in the long run, potentially could even save money if we're able to cut a bus here or there within the programming. Minimally, the customer service is going to improve vastly, which is something that we've been hearing from staff and parents, so we're happy about that. Again, I wanted to talk to you. So at this point, we're about $500,000 over the $57 million recommendation before you this evening, and just wanted to show you how we're going about actually closing that gap. As we look at the high school and the middle school level, and we take a look at class enrollments and class requests for the upcoming fall season, the numbers of students actually at the, and you've heard me talk about this, the numbers of students at the secondary level is actually decreasing a little bit, while we're seeing an increase at the elementary school level. So the district enrollment's going to be about flat for next year, but it's because of that offset. One of the things that we are able to do and still have very attractive and reasonable class sizes at the middle school level, at the high school level, is reduce a math position at the high school and 2 art positions at the high school. Those 3 staffing positions will not be included or not included within next year's budget document, as well as 2 middle school positions for McCarthy Middle School in the 5th grade. We're seeing a smaller than usual class size coming up from just the 4th grade to McCarthy next year, and we're able to make that adjustment and still have class sizes at McCarthy and Parker, both in the middle schools, in the low 20s, 22, 23, maybe 24 students, but under the 25 guideline of the school committee. None of us, the administration or the school committee, wanted to have to make these recommendations or really consider this, but given the budget scenario, given the guidelines that we're trying to live within, we felt that these positions were reasonable to try to accomplish our program for next year. Lastly, a couple of, one minor offset to the budget. We do still take in school choice students, so these are students from other districts that come in. We currently have 50 students that attend the Chelmsford Public Schools, and we receive about $5,000 per student from the sending district. That program is going to continue, and we currently in the fiscal 17 budget included a line item for about $230,000 as an offset for school choice. We're recommending bringing that up to $250,000 to basically fully account for the number of school choice students that we'll receive. Tomorrow evening at the regular school committee meeting, I have a recommendation to the school committee to allow in up to 54 students. So we know that minimally 49 students, there are 50 currently enrolled. One is a senior in high school, so they'll be graduating. So we have 49 who will continue with us in the district. I'm recommending bringing in an additional 5 at the high school level, again, because we have capacity, which would bring it to 54. If the 54, we receive the $5,000 per each district, we'd be bringing in $270. In the budget, we're going to budget $250. I don't want to get too ambitious with the revenue offset, but that's where the $19,000 budget adjustment comes from. And then lastly, and this is very positive news, we're a member district of Valley Collaborative. That's our special education collaborative made up from several different districts. They're offering very good programs. They've totally kind of revamped their financial side of the house and are doing an excellent job. And they're at the point where they actually have excess capacity, or excess revenue, and they've maxed out all of their available legal ways to kind of retain funds within the organization. So at this point, at the end of the fiscal year, they have to return excess funds to their member districts proportionally to how much each district spent during the course of the year. So they notified us at the last board meeting that Chelmsford was looking to receive back approximately $440,000 at the end of June. So we have 2 options. We can either take it as a reimbursement, or we can apply it as a credit to fiscal 18 tuitions. We haven't decided which we'd be doing yet, but we know we'll have money coming back to us. Typically, I would not recommend a one-time revenue source as a a way to kind of solve a budget, because it would, in essence, just create a structural deficit the following year, and we wouldn't want to do that. I'm comfortable recommending, less than half of that money go to solve the problem for fiscal 18 for two reasons. Number one, if it isn't a continuous source and it doesn't continue in years to come, at least we're smoothing out the reduction over, 2 or more fiscal years. But I do think actually we're going to see two things in fiscal 18 and fiscal 19. Either Valley is going to continue to generate excess revenue and then proportionally return it to its member districts, or they're going to be able to lower their tuition right out of the gate and not bring in revenue and then have to return it. Either way, we would be a beneficiary of either the lesser rates or the refund at the end of the year. So I'm comfortable making that as a recommendation, because I don't think this is going to be a one-time factor. So those are the recommendations. It brings it up slightly under $500,000. That I evaluated with the school committee approximately a week and a half ago to bring our budget in line with the $57 million that is before you this evening. So our recommendation is to appropriate the $57 million to support the operations of the Chelmsford Public Schools for fiscal year 18. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 4.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen recommends approval of this article by a vote of 3 to 1.
And does the School Committee have a recommendation?
The School Committee supports passage of Article 4.
Okay, now is an opportunity to make inquiry or debate.
Precinct 7, Precinct 7, Andy Sillinge. Two teacher positions, art teacher positions, will be eliminated. Does that mean that the art that they were teaching will not be taught? Or does that mean they'll be replaced by a less competent teacher?
No, to your point, actually, when it comes to both the art teaching positions as well as the mathematics position at the high school, it will not affect course offerings. So the existing course offerings that are running right now would still be offered next year. What it's going to do is basically increase some of the class sizes for some of the offerings that are occurring. So students will still have the same menu of options to pick from as far as courses are concerned, but we did have some art classes, again, because of schedule and also because of numbers, that were only in the mid-teens that were operating. So now they will be, if we reduce these to art teaching positions, they will be in the high teens, the low 20s, which again is still a desirable number, and students will not be missing out on options they previously had. One of the, if I can for a second, just to clarify something. So there were 5 positions overall that were recommended as budget reductions. We were able to, through attrition, basically be able to retain 4 out of the 5 teachers because they are licensed in alternate areas where we have known retirements. So 4 out of the 5 teachers will still be offered employment and will be transferred basically into other positions in the district that we have openings in because of retirements. So they will still be employees of the district and they still will be serving our kids. They just won't be in the same position that they were in this year.
Well, I understand part of it, but not the whole thing. So if you get rid of 2 art teachers, you think you can move those students to existing art classes, and that will take care of that? Is that?
Yes, I'm saying that we're not going to see a reduction in the number of art. We're going to see a reduction in the number of art classes. We're not going to see a reduction in the type of art classes that we're offering. The enrollment numbers in the classes that we currently have are going to increase. So instead of, say, having 16 students in Art 1, we're going to have 19 or 20 students in Art 1. We're still going to offer art, that specific class, but you're going to have a higher class size.
So the only reason I ask it, I have very little experience, but I have specific experience on this. My children were in school, and Mrs. Brown was let go or moved, and another teacher was put in that place. And the students didn't like that because they were degraded in their level. So I just want to make sure that that's not happening now.
No, unfortunately, like for these reductions, no one's being put in their place. These positions are actually being eliminated.
Thank you.
Paul Ragazio, Precinct 7. I just have a question, again, to Dr. Lang through the moderator. Again, last year, this committee, this town approved the purchase of 12 modular classrooms, essentially for all-day kindergarten. Yet when the bid went out, I guess it was for 16 classrooms, and then actually, I believe a total of 22 portable classrooms were purchased. Yet I understand only 10 kindergarten teachers are being added. So how do we relate the 22 additional classrooms that the town is purchasing to the 10 kindergarten teachers that we're adding? That I don't, if you could explain that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. The base bid that went out earlier this late fall, early winter was for 16 classes, 4 at each of our 4 elementaries.
Yet there was only 12 in the budget, in the proposal last year at this town meeting. It was 12 classrooms for $8 million.
Yes, but the bid that we put out ended up having 16 classrooms. We were looking for 4 classrooms in each building, and we asked for an alternate. So we asked for pricing because we knew town meeting, again, had appropriated, it was $7.9 million, just slight of $8 million. So we asked for the base bid, but then we also asked if they were going to be putting new classrooms or building new structures at the 4 schools, give us the pricing at the same time for going from 4 classrooms to 6 classrooms at 3 of the buildings. At Center Elementary School, the site can physically only accommodate 4, and that's the attached property. At the other 3 schools where the detached, there was sufficient space to go from 4 classrooms to 6 classrooms. So we wanted to ask what the price would be to do that. And when the bids came in significantly under budget. And we were able to basically add 22 classrooms to the elementary schools. Center will receive 4, and the other 3 elementary schools will receive 6. We're still going to come in under budget. We're actually going to be returning, approximately over $1 million to the town and not utilizing that for that. At least 8 of the classrooms will be used, not those specific classrooms, other rooms within the building, but it's adding capacity for full-day K. But full-day K was only part of the request when we came to town meeting. We had identified the need through the facility assessment for additional classroom space at the elementary school levels because we had some classrooms that were sharing space. We had some teachers that were having to be extra creative and using little smaller breakout rooms that weren't full classrooms for their instructional purposes. So 8 to 10 of the classrooms will be used for kindergarten, and the remaining classrooms will be used at the elementary school level to help us create that extra space at the elementary school level that we desired.
So again, we're adding 22 classrooms in the total system, yet you want a new high school because we're space limited.
Okay,
I know this is not a
Ragazio,
question about
Mr.
the high school.
Ragazio, we're not talking about a high school right now. We're just talking about the budget for this year.
Okay,
I understand your concern, and there may be an appropriate time to bring that up.
I mean, we're adding a small elementary school of 22 rooms in the system. And again, I don't understand it because in with the consultant, the projection over the next 10 years is still only 5,000 students. Again, I don't understand, whereas 6-7 years ago, we had 5,500 students. And again, I don't understand why we need that extra space.
No, I understand what you're saying. But as I indicated earlier, if you look at even next year's enrollment based on the enrollment projection we did, the district enrollment is going to remain about the same, correct? But high school is coming down at the same time elementary is going up. So we need the extra classroom space at the elementary level. That is going to be the short-term need for the school department. Over the next number of years, we're going to see increased class sizes or kids enrolling in the district, K1, 2. We're not seeing that at the high school level. So the space need is at the elementary school level, and that's what those modular buildings take care of, is really that short-term space need for the district.
Yeah. Again, I don't appreciate that, but thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Arroway, Precinct 1. First, I'd like to thank you for putting in the sheets on the budget drivers. It really helps to evaluate this budget. But I would ask, in the interest of transparency, could you provide the dollar amounts that are that this slide 52 and slide 53 represent? 52 is the kindergarten and 53 is language pathologists and special ed paraprofessionals.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can tell you that the slide here with the kindergarten increases, which would be the kindergarten teachers, the additional recess lunch aides, the additional cleaning dedicated to the modular classrooms, is in the $700,000 to $750,000 ballpark, just shy of $750,000. And in the speech pathologist additional sped para page, you're probably looking at just shy of $200,000.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to provide the actuals after, but that gives
Round
you
numbers
a
are
good
good.
round number.
Yeah, round numbers are good. The second question I had is under the language pathologist and special education paraprofessionals. Who specifies the individual student education plans?
There's a team that would actually meet to decide what services a child requires. So it depends if it's a team that convenes within the school department of Chelmsford. So if it's a Chelmsford Public School student, we would have the student's special education teacher, regular education teacher. There's a team chair that actually oversees the process. There might be a number of different specialists. Parents are involved in that process. That's if it's a team process that we're managing. In most of those situations, and that's where a lot of the driving force for the additional speech pathologist comes from, the teams have actually identified the specific learning needs of the students requiring additional speech services. That was largely our teams making those determinations. The counter to that is the additional paraprofessional services that we've had to add over the course of the year. Students come to us, this is the other half of it, students come to us from other districts with already identified IEPs that may call for a one-on-one paraprofessional in their plan. So when they come to us with that plan, we haven't been part of that because they may have just moved into our community. The district, wherever they were coming from, it could be Andover, Borica, Lowell, if they've identified and included a one-on-one paraprofessional in the plan, then we're required to pick up that service. And then our team at the next reeval would look and see if that service was still required, if it was necessary, and our team may make an adjustment at that point. But from the time that the child enters the district, we're required to comply with what's already been determined in the sending district's plan.
So is it fair to say that we have control over some of it and some of it we're subject to?
Yes, some we have control and influence over, perhaps based on our programming, our services, and our individuals who participate at the table. There's a great deal that we do not influence or we do not have control over. Specifically those children that move into the district with pre-existing plans, or even may move into the district that may already be in an out-of-district placement, say Valley Collaborative, our collaborative. If someone moves from Borica to Chelmsford and they already have a student attending Valley Collaborative, as soon as they move in and the determination is made that they are now a Chelmsford resident, we're on the hook and we immediately start paying for those services for that child because Valley is a collaborative. There are instances also where if a child was in, say, a private special education school setting and they move into the district, the sending district may still be responsible for that child for the remainder of that school year, but then we become fiscally responsible for the following school year. In those cases, we're at least able to, as we're putting budgets together and we know what students are coming to us, we can make budget adjustments or recommendations within our tuition line to pick up the costs in the subsequent fiscal year. But we're not able to make those adjustments if a child comes in and, let's say, is attending a collaborative program. So we have some control and influence over pieces of this, but there are a great deal of pieces that we do not have control over.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Claire Janot, Precinct 7. I have two questions. One might be more appropriate for the town accountant, I'm not sure. But following up on the Valley Collaborative credit for their excess reserves is what it sounds like. You said that it's $440,000 and that you have a choice on whether you apply it as credits against tuition this year, next year, I don't know, or this $200,000 that you're applying to your budget adjustments, I guess. I don't understand the proper accounting for this, but to me, as an accountant and finance director, it feels like a fairly substantial amount of money,
Correct.
which is really a return of a prior appropriation, and if we're just smoothing it together, is that my special word, you're going to see flips in these line items year after year that don't make sense and don't really represent the services for that year to the students.
Right.
So I'd like an opinion from the town accountant on this if I could.
You're right, Claire. You're not, the way that this has to be applied has to be applied to the special ed line item of the bills. The credit will be that line item. It does skew the budget when you're looking at budget from year to year of really how your actual cost of because you're seeing this credit hitting that line item. What they have to do is that whole credit, they have to take that whole credit, but they can then save some money in their their sped costs that they can then roll over to the next year. So even though they're saying they're not going to be using, go ahead.
I guess my question bluntly is, why is this not a miscellaneous receipt to the community and then reappropriated? And you might think it's a distinction without a difference, but I don't think it is, frankly. It's no different than we appropriate millions of dollars for capital articles, and at some point, if they're not spent for that purpose, it's recovered. It's,
Right.
I don't understand the difference on this.
Right. What it will do is it will come in as a credit, and it will come in, what we owe the collaborative will be a credit, so we won't owe the collaborative as much. Is basically how they'll do it. It won't come in as a check form, it'll be a credit. So this won't be actual money that comes in. It'll actually just be a credit on an invoice through the collaborative. We see it that way. It's not actually, they don't actually issue us funding or a check.
Okay, so from a transparency perspective, this tells me that I've got 440 that's due back to us that was probably accrued over some period of years. I don't know how long it took them to build up this excess retained earnings, but we're only using part of it this year.
Yeah, because we got a $200,000 last year.
No, last year.
We get this from our collaborative in Acton Boxborough. I asked for a check.
Right. Well, this is one of the first times that Valley is actually doing this. So.
They did it 2 years ago, and they did it through a credit.
Oh, they did a credit?
Yes, they did. It was a $200,000.
Valley's basically giving us the option, and the school department needs to get back to Valley and say, would we like to receive a check, or would we like to just receive a credit
Right.
on file against future tuitions? Being a finance person also, I'm not, I don't like to see those fluctuations in year to years. So one of the things, if you look at our budget book on page 53, one of the ways that we're going to try to, you can look at it later, but one of the ways we're going to try to account for this is we have all of our tuitions basically hitting one account number at this point, and then you see all the different offsets listed, circuit breaker, we are using some school choice funds, now you're going to see this Valley Collaborative credit. So what I want to see happen is the actual total tuitions be the constant number that we can look at and not have these spikes and dips. Year over year, and actually start to track those various credits that come in and apply them to the document. We're going to obviously, I'll work with Darlene and John and figure out the best way to account for this. As far as, do we just take the check and have it come through the town and be reallocated to us? Do we apply the credit? We'll have those discussions. We haven't had that yet. Again, this is relatively new for some of these collaboratives, and we're also going to be receiving a legal opinion from the collaborative because they have to figure out exactly how, because now you're talking, I think this collaborative has in excess of $2 million in total that they're going to be giving back, so this is pretty significant money, and the collaboratives are under watch because
A
of
much
all the
different light than they were 10 years
Correct.
ago.
But we will be working with them on that.
I mean, I appreciate that, and I guess I'd like somebody to report back to us on what's going on, because the way I look at this one, it's 440 available, maybe 200's getting accounted for on a slide here. That means there's more money available somewhere that we can draw on when we need to, and it's not accounted for the way it would be if it was revenues in the special revenue fund or receipts then falling to free cash. That's my problem.
Yeah, but this is only going to be for special education, and it would really be no different than, say, a circuit breaker fund, which would have money which would roll over at the end of a fiscal year.
Well, there's a statute that supports the circuit breaker fund being only for special ed.
Right.
There's no statute for this. This feels like form over substance to me, where the collaborative is deciding how we should account for it, not state law or anything else. That's my real question. So we've talked about it enough, but
Sure.
I'd like
I
it to
understand
be
what you're-
looked into further. And then my second question is, actually, Dr. Lang, it's on Paul's budget book on page 825. There's a nice chart in here for staffing history, general government and school department full-time equivalents for fiscal 14 each year through fiscal 18. And while you've done a great job explaining full-time equivalents in the school department going up this coming year in the 18 budget for kindergarten and whatnot, the overall growth from the school department's full-time equivalents in 14 in here was 619 FTEs, and we're up to 755 for next year.
I don't have the document you're talking about in front of you. What are you
Oh.
referring to?
So maybe it's a question for Paul on how these FTEs have been accounted for and calculated, but it's quite a substantial growth, predominantly, I guess, in the paraprofessional support staff, going from 99 to 160 over the 5-year period.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things I wonder is, are these people being looked at every year and reassigned if they're no longer necessary in the IEP for a child, or do they just somehow fall into the staffing and stay there?
Right. No, I hear what you're saying, and actually, this is something that I flagged in last year's school department budget. I account when we're doing the staffing a little bit differently than had been accounted for here. So in our budget, we refer to things as FPEs, or full position equivalents. In a case in point, like the lunch and recess aides that we're going to be adding this year to the schools. Those are only 3-hour-a-day people. In prior budgets going before 17, those figures basically would have been converted into like 8-hour jobs. So, 2.5 would have been combined as like one FTE. But in my budget and the way we were kind of working things in the school department, I'm considering each of those a position. It's easier for us to track, 8 half-time positions than, 1, meaning 2.5 half-time positions. So that's why you see those numbers jump so dramatically. Let me give you an example on.
So this is apples and oranges in terms of how the accounting.
If you look at fiscal 16 and prior, you're looking at like full-time equivalents. Those have been converted. If you're looking at 17 and 18, those are position equivalents. So you're looking at apples and oranges.
All right.
In a couple of years, when this all kind of filters out and you're looking at actual positions, it's going to make more sense. It's going to be easier for us in the school department to track the positions when they get added, as opposed to the full-time equivalents.
Very helpful. It's a very helpful tool. And if you and Paul are doing it on 2 different systems on how you count personnel, I don't know how the body understands what we're doing.
All right, I appreciate that.
Lori Coolis, Precinct 6. So I thank you for the presentation. I did recognize in the presentation that you gave tonight about the cutting of the 5 teaching positions and of adding a speech position and a couple other positions, paras, and the 10 new K positions, and also a new transportation coordinator. Can you also, in this budget, is there also a new assistant business manager?
No, the assistant business manager position was actually included a year ago.
Okay.
It remained vacant for a period of time, but it's recently been filled. But that position is being represented to the school committee and then town meeting last year when this came up. We're using revolving and grant funds to pay for that position, so it doesn't impact the local operating budget.
And then I was hoping that the members of the school committee, finance committee, or the Board of Selectmen could explain why they voted no to this budget? Or if you could give the recount again, not everybody could hear. But also we're curious about why they voted no.
I voted no against the budget because I felt that the school committee had slid in the operating costs for full-day kindergarten without town meeting discussion and approval, and typically their budget would go up about 3-point-something% a year. There's an extra percent. There's about an extra $1 million in there for full-day kindergarten, and I felt that discussion, since we haven't had the money to go forward with full-day kindergarten for as long as my child has been in school, he's graduating this year, what changed in our financial situation town-wise that all of a sudden we should just throw the money in there, and why didn't we do it sooner? So since I did not get a satisfactory answer and we did not have a discussion as a body, I felt I cannot support this. I also have trouble with justifying a $22,000 position for transportation plus whatever the benefit costs are going to be there when we're losing teachers. I think that when we have priorities, scheduling buses is something that we can handle with our existing staff, and we should be dealing with some real priorities.
Thank you.
The school committee vote count on the school budget was 3-2, and I'll let the people who are the dissenters explain why they voted that way. It was actually, the town manager explained it somewhat at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Barbara, but I personally wasn't against the school budget. I just thought that some of the position cuts to get down to that final number, some of them I believe were appropriate, and some I didn't think were, in the best interest of the students. So I wasn't voting against the budget. I was just voting against how we get to that final number.
I think Dennis explained it perfectly. I have no problem with the $57 million budget. How we got down to $57 million is my problem. I don't believe that we should be cutting teachers. I think that in our policy, we have a limit, a class limit. The highest we want to accept is 25. So those fifth graders at McCarthy are 18, which really should be a goal across our district, I would hope. Those smaller classrooms show in every study, smaller classrooms benefit our children.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that also. I'm a school nurse in the district, and there's so many children with social, emotional, and behavioral needs and health needs, and with going up in class size, it drastically has an impact on every student in the district, and thank you.
Thank you. Scott Davidson, Precinct 3. I wanted to talk about transportation costs in the district. I thought all the comparable district information that you provided in the warrant was very helpful in terms of per pupil expenditures and where we rank in terms of our results and things like that. So it sort of led me to go onto the State Department website. One of the things that I noticed was that when you look at the 10 comparable districts to Chelmsford, our transportation costs are the most expensive of all 10, and ours are significant. It's not like we're a little bit higher, we're significantly higher. Can you just speak to what the drivers of that are?
Sure.
These are comparable districts, so we're talking, Shrewsbury.
Right. When you look at comparable districts, though, I mean, academics, a lot of it's based on academics. That's relatively comparable. Your physical location isn't, and I can't speak to where these other 10 communities are and what their competitiveness among transportation contracts are. We have a situation, so we just went out to bid for a new contract. So it's basically a 3-year contract with 2 option years, an optional 4th and 5th year. We only had one bidder on the contract because there's really only one transportation company in our area that is providing bus service on a scale that can accommodate a town like Chelmsford. So we have 29 full-size buses in our contract. And realistically, when we put this out to bid, and it's state required to go out to bid for transportation contracts, we had North Reading Transportation and we had First Student come to the pre-bid meeting. Those are really the only 2 companies in the area that are going to bid something like that. And when we actually had the bid opening, First Student didn't even bid. They ended up determining that it wasn't worth their while. They didn't have enough resources in the area to make a go at it. So we only had one bid through North Reading Transportation. I think a lot of it is just geographical and where we are. North Reading has kind of a monopoly, quite honestly, on the bus contracts in the area. Lowell is obviously kind of a hub for them. They have about 60 buses on the Lowell contract. I know they have Drake now. I believe they're picking up Ulrica. It's just a competitive industry, and unfortunately, we don't have competition in our area. So I do think that drives up the cost when you just don't have competition. And unfortunately, we have to get some of these other larger companies who could accommodate a contract like ours to really be able to make our prices go down. But I think all in all, when you take a look at the rates that they gave us, they're still in the norm with what our surrounding towns near us ended up with for bus contracts for next year. We're going to be at $330 a day for a bus. And again, Lowell's kind of the predictor for this area. They're looking at about $350. So we're actually getting a more attractive bus price per day for a vehicle in our town than the city next to us is for their contract. But a lot of it just comes down to competition.
Did the bid we send out, did that contemplate that we're busing the kindergartners now?
Yeah, well, we're already busing the kindergartners. It's just,
but for full day.
Yeah, so it's just full day now. So the midday routes came out. And also, the midday routes really didn't cost us anything, though, because the midday routes were being offset by community ed funds. So we don't have the cost, but we also don't have the offset. So that was net neutral to the budget.
So basically, we're kind of stuck because there's only one company that will do what we need to have done?
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, your only other option is to bring it, in-house and do it ourselves.
Right.
I would not recommend that.
Right.
But that's really your only other option until other companies can make a go at it competitively within our area, which is largely the Merrimack Valley.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pardon me, is anyone having any difficulty hearing? Because I'm hearing a lot of noise coming from back up to us. So if you have to have a discussion, please go into the hallway so that the town meeting reps can hear. And if in the future, if anybody's having a difficult time, please raise your hand so I'll know that that's the reason why you're raising your hand and not for anything else. Okay? Thank you.
Danielle Evans, Precinct 9. I have a question about the cutting of the 2 fifth-grade teachers at McCarthy. Can you give me more detail about exactly what this is doing to class sizes? I mean, how much are you talking about a class size of fifth graders going to be at McCarthy next year?
Sure. We did a report, and I'll be happy to send that out to the town meeting reps. It is on our website. When we take a look at the incoming fifth grade classes from the 2 feeder elementary schools for next year, there were approximately, this off the top of my head, like 185, 190 kids going into McCarthy. McCarthy is a 10-strand school, so there are 10 teachers at each grade level. Parker only has 8. So if you have, let's round it up. So if you have, 190 going into 10, you're looking at 19 class size. If you cut from the 10 teachers down to 8, class sizes were 22 to 23 per average. Across at Parker, again, they only have the 8. They're at the 22, 23 now. So that was the rationale behind it. Basically, it will still be under the guideline, under the school committee's guideline of 25. It'll be basically providing equity or parity between McCarthy and Parker. And it's just because we're not seeing, in particular for next year, the numbers coming up from the 2 feeder schools from McCarthy.
So my next question is, did you look at this as just a quantitative issue, as just numbers, or was there any sort of inquiry into what these classes were like at South Row and Center, what the needs of these children are? Because children aren't just numbers. They're not just a quantity on a page. They're not pegs. I mean, they're just not. And you're talking about I'm telling you, I am a parent of a 4th grader at South Row. And I will say this publicly, and I will say the caveat, I am up here now as my representative job representing the other parents I know who have kids, because my kid's not going to be at McCarthy next year. She'll be at the charter school. And I have another child at the charter school, and I've come under great criticism that I send my kids out of this district while I'm a town meeting rep. But you know what, tonight, I feel like, well, you know what, this is part of why I'm doing it, because my daughter's not going to be caught in the mess that is going to be 5th grade at McCarthy next year, and that the teachers are going to have to deal with, and that the parents are going to have to deal with, because it doesn't sound to me like discussions were had with the current 4th grade teachers at Center and South Row and the principals down there to find out qualitatively the group of kids that are coming in and what their needs are. At South Row right now, you have a class that has such high needs, you have 2 full-time teachers in that classroom. So just because you may have numbers that are lower on a page, it doesn't mean that those kids coming in to a very difficult transition to begin with. We ask our 5th graders in Chelmsford to go up to middle school, to McCarthy, which is a large school to begin with. That is an enormous, it is a really hard transition for 10-year-olds to make that transition into middle school. We ask them to do it, and generally they do it brilliantly because you have a great staff at McCarthy, and you have the support, but then when you start eroding that and putting the pressure on the teachers, everybody is going to suffer for that. And it's not because you don't have good people doing their job, it just is what it is. And then I hear what's going on at the high school, and it really concerns me that there wasn't, and I think which is why the school committee votes are the way they are, is that there really was not, I mean, for a $57 million budget, and we're talking about $500,000, $400,000, and even less for these cuts, that we didn't look at, you know, other means to cut that, yes, may hurt a bit, but it doesn't deal with direct instruction to the children and to cutting there. I mean, kudos to us as a district for finally getting full-day kindergarten in. I think that's wonderful. I think it's fantastic. It is about time in this district. My kids are far beyond that. But you know what? I really think right now we're doing it on the backs of other students higher up in the district. And I think that's shameful for this district, and I think it's disappointing for this district. And I would strongly encourage, and this is because I hear from other parents whose kids are going into this 5th grade at McCarthy next year who are very upset and alarmed about this, that I think you really need to go back and reconsider. Town meeting tonight can appropriate your budget for you, and I support the school budget, but I really think you need to take your school committee and your staff and go back and rethink these cuts for next year and what you're doing. Look at your curriculum. Look how you're implementing curriculum. Maybe look at this transportation position. Look at other things. Be creative. Dig down and do it. I know you all care about these kids. I don't doubt the job you're doing as superintendent. I don't doubt the job anybody is doing. These are difficult decisions. I just think while quantitatively you can make a rationale with numbers on a page, and I get that, you really need to go back and look at the qualitative piece of this and do what I think is the right thing here. And that's all. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Sure.
I'll be very brief, but to suggest for a second that we don't take each individual student within the district as a student, I honestly take exception to. The amount of staff time and effort that goes into looking at these budget scenarios, making recommendations, always has the kids' interest at heart. We have taken a look at all of our student needs. We've taken a look at our just from special education students. We've looked at our ELL students who are moving from grade level to grade level when we make these decisions. These aren't decisions that we gladly make or we recommend just based on numbers. I don't want people walking away thinking that these decisions are based solely on numbers. There's obviously the numbers come into play, but there's a rationale between why these decisions are made. Yes, schools have had input around service needs of kids and what the different special ed needs next year are. That's why we're actually adding a speech language pathologist, because we're looking at the IEP and the service grids, and we know there's extra services that are coming up from the elementary school to those classrooms. This is, when it comes to programming, really a discussion with the school committee, and it is a discussion that the school committees had and will have through the rest of the spring and throughout the budget seasons as they come forward. I just don't want to think people walking out thinking that we're not, taking kids into consideration. I mean, that's our business. That's what we do every day. These decisions are not made lightly. They're made with a lot of thought and input. And again, I just don't want people thinking that it's purely a numbers game, because it is not.
Sue Danderoff, Precinct 9. I know that would be a tough act to follow, so I'll be brief. I just want to reiterate that that's not just one voice. I've received numerous emails from parents and PTO concerned with the teacher cuts at the middle school and high school. I just want to point out to this body that on page 17 and 18 of the SchoolComm report, there's $750,000 of priorities that aren't in this year's budget, but that are listed as priorities to get budgeted. Almost $200,000 in assistant principals at each of the elementaries, 120 for school psychologists, 110 for special ed. I just ask our school committee, Dennis and Barbara and the whole school committee, to continue to fight for those teacher positions at the middle and high school. Personal experience with the math classes at the high school, whatever the numbers are, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can tell you it's overcrowded. And no fault to the teachers, but they cannot support each individual student need. So that's.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4. One quick question. Town meeting several years ago, actually 2 predecessors of yours ago, paid for a bus coordinator with the bus fees. That was how they justified it to this body. Have you, are you giving back some of those bus fees that previously paid for that coordinator? Or are we just spending the money again, justifying the money again for the same position?
Yeah, I have no firsthand knowledge of that. The amount of money that we receive in the bus fees, if you look at page 46 of the budget, we include that the revolving fund offset as an offset to this budget. So I guess whether it's going as an offset to the contract to the bus company, or it's going to an offset to, say, a staff position, would really net out. Basically, we're taking in and we're budgeting $300,000 of revenue that's coming in from the bus fees, and it is going back to to offset transportation costs. Again, I didn't know that was the case a few years ago.
That was the case. $400. I remember the fee. It was
no, I'm talking about the offset.
It cost $1,200 for my kids to get on the bus with all the athletic fees and the rest. And the justification to town meeting, we should all do our history homework, was that it paid for a bus coordinator and then the new location for the school committee office. So it's a little irksome to see the justification coming in this form when the people paying the fees had it justified by paying it then. So we're justifying it twice. Things have changed over time, I understand that, but we need to be careful in justification. Second, a little bit of a question. How many children are we actually increasing in our kindergarten, or how many additional hours per child? Maybe a combination of those two.
I don't have the total number of students who have registered because we're still going through the registration process. The day is basically doubling for them. We're a little bit more than doubling in class time. I believe they're in school right now approximately 2.5 hours a day, and they're going to be moving to a full day program. So that's going to include, full instructional blocks and lunch and recess and specialists and things along those lines. So they'll be attending a regular day like the other students, approximately a 6-hour day.
I'm assuming a nap time in there because these are
no napping.
No nap time.
No napping.
The kids that are in there, is it 100? Is it 200? Is it 500? I don't know.
Oh, just ballpark number? The class size that we try to go to for kindergarten because of the age would be somewhere around 22 per class. And right now, if we're looking at somewhere between 375 and 400 kindergarten students in total.
Okay. It's those same children going for another 2.5 hours?
What? I don't think I understood you.
I'm assuming the kids in our town go to half-day kindergarten, some in the morning, some in the afternoon.
Correct.
All those kids will be going, all the same kids, same faces, will be going to full-day kindergarten?
Yes, they will be going to full-day kindergarten, but there's a lot of students also that would prefer a full-day program that aren't currently availing themselves of the half-day program that we offer because they want a full-day program. So we're seeing some of those kids registering for the fall now, which is what's throwing our numbers off a little bit.
Okay. We don't know the plan number for that? How many kids you're adding to our cost?
That's what we're holding the registration right now for, to be able to do that. But that's why we've allowed ourselves the flexibility between either adding 8 or 10 teachers.
Okay. And the total cost, is it $1 million?
No, it was somewhere between ballpark 700 and 750,000.
Okay, including the classroom space. You said that we need, you said we need people to clean it, aides.
Yes, so that's for the additional teaching position, the additional lunch recess aides, and the additional cost of the cleaning contract based on the square footage of the new
That's
space.
$750?
Between 700 and 750.
Okay. In earlier session here, we talked about adding 108 units over on Mill Road. This speaker is terrible. And 168 units on Turnpike. I see that we went from 16 additional temporary classrooms to 22. Are you anticipating one child per unit, half a child per unit? Obviously, you picked up more classrooms, anticipating a number of additional students.
Yes, there were two things. We have existing populations in our buildings that are just too squeezed right now. So when we were going through the facility assessment, we identified the need for additional space for both kindergarten, but additional elementary school classrooms. And there were a number of developments that were already kind of on the horizon that the estimate is built into those projections. I don't have those numbers before me today, but that was factored in. Since then, and again, that's why we're inviting Evan from the planning board to come to the school committee meeting, because there are additional housing developments that are being presented and proposed to take place over the coming years as well. And what we need to do is figure out exactly which neighborhoods and districts they're going to fall within. And again, figure out what years they're going to fall within. It's not a one-per-one basis. A lot of it depends on whether, is it a studio apartment? Is it a 1, 2, 3 bedroom? There's a formula that you use, and the enrollment projection company will use as well to project how many students to anticipate based on the housing development. The project at, again, I think it was Mill Road and Turnpike, somewhere on there, will most likely feed to South Row. So that was considered when they were doing the enrollment projection at South Row. South Row's numbers are favorable now compared to the other 3 elementary schools. But that particular development, I can tell you, was discussed as far as, say, feeding to South Row, so that they are looking to accommodate that.
And you don't have a figure for how many the 108 units will generate for you?
I don't off the top of my head, no.
Okay. If we add, the total projection that the town manager gave us was 800 units at $15,000 a child, that's $24 million more to the school budget that we need to somehow come here and pick up. And I'm hearing that we're adding arguably $1 million or $750,000 for kindergarten by taking away some of the older classroom space and teachers. That's somewhat concerning to me, having had my kids go through without full-day kindergarten,
right, and
having them very successful. I just hate to spend that kind of money when we're going to come back to town meeting every year and have to spend it again. This is not a cost that goes away. And as a result of that, I'm going to vote no on this budget and follow a couple of the selectmen and offer my concern as a taxpayer that we can't afford to keep doubling our cost every 10 years. And by adding the number of housing units in Precinct 4 and not doubling the size of Center School, which is about a block away from the 168 units you intend to put in on Turnpike. And by the way, that overlay district, it didn't come with businesses first, it came with housing and students first. 168 units on Turnpike, 108 units on Mill Road. That equates to probably quite a few students. And I'm glad that you're putting in a lot of extra classrooms because we're going to need it.
No, we're definitely going to need the extra space. The only thing is I don't want to belabor this, but I didn't quite follow your calculation of how many kids were going to be coming in the years to come. Perhaps we can just have a side file later.
If we have 108 units,
I don't know how many kids that's going to generate. I'd have to go back to the projections.
wild guess, one per kid, one per building unit.
No, it really depends on the number of bedrooms, things along those lines.
Cut it in half, 12 million additional to the town budget, just for school. Thank you.
Lori Coolis, Precinct 6. He kind of touched on this, but I think my question might be a little bit clearer. For this fiscal budget, is any new developments that are going to be, groundbreaking, ready to have occupancy accounted for in this budget? For any of the housing units that were discussed in Article 1?
I would have to go literally development by development. All the articles, the developments listed in Article 1 aren't like coming online right now. So we have to see how it's phasing. The ones that we're taking into consideration when we do like student enrollments and headcounts was an additional development. I don't have the name of it, but out near the Byam School. So that was taken into consideration. And then I know, I don't think it's actually going to hit us for next year, but that Turnpike one at the end of Mill Road and Turnpike is probably going to impact enrollment a year from now because they're just starting their building now.
Perfect. My question was, you
But
addressed
we're
it.
working
is
with
to
them
make
as soon as
sure.
we have, we've been in communication with Evan, the town planner, and when we get updated figures for when these different developments are coming online, how many units, how many bedrooms are in the units, we're able to then give that to NESDEC, which is the group that helps us with the long-range student enrollment projections, and they update their projections for us.
So then, do we not know right now, until you meet with the planning board, how many will be ready for occupancy for the start of the next school year?
No, there's not a significant number of developments that are coming on like for next year that we don't know about, that we haven't accounted for. Again, there's still a little bit of flux out near the Byam right now, but there's nothing significant that we can't handle for the next 17-18 school year.
Okay, perfect. I was just I was more curious just because I was concerned about how it might impact the McCarthy. So.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Christine Lindberg, Precinct 5. My question is along the lines of Lori's as well, which is, do we know any of the building impacts? I know I'm in the Byam community, and there's a ton of building going on Littleton Road. Do we know the impact?
You're the third person who's asking about the impact. The superintendent has answered as best as he can.
I'll rephrase my question then. I'll rephrase it. So here's my question. If we end up realizing impact in the fall, do we have a plan if we end up cutting those teachers and we end up needing them at the McCarthy level? And I'm speaking as a parent of McCarthy. I have a fifth grader there now. As Danielle said, it is a huge transition. It's a phenomenal school. The teachers do an incredible job, and I really believe that the small class sizes have greatly contributed to my son's success as well as his friends. So is there a plan if we end up seeing a spike in enrollment in the fall, and we've already cut these teachers? I guess I'm looking for a backup plan.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely appreciate that, and I told the school committee as well, we're not going to be in a situation where we open school in September and class sizes are 28 and 29, like this group moves in and we didn't know about it or whatnot. We're going to continue to monitor the enrollment. We do it every year, so this isn't just because of these teacher cuts, but we actually would look at monthly what's happening with the enrollment in the district. If we find, for whatever reason, that the class sizes were going to exceed the 25 average class limit, I would go to the school committee and I'd say, for X, Y, Z reason, we're now looking at enrollments that are are going up, based, again, on this particular reason. And I would then bring in a recommendation to add staff back, reallocate staff within the district. We're not going to let class size, exceed the limits and not know about it. Again, at this point in time, just given the numbers that we know about, we're projecting based on the known kids that we have that are coming up to the middle school, class sizes would increase from, say, that 19 to 22, 23. Will you have a class with 24 in it? Yeah, probably, just because of the way the averaging works, but I do not feel at this time you'd have classes over 25. And if we ever got to that point, I would bring a recommendation to the school committee to make a budget adjustment, and we would figure out how to fund that and reduce those class sizes.
Because one of the things I do see is I'm at Byam as well, and I see that this elementary school there is exploding at the seams. And so while next year we may see a dip in the numbers at McCarthy, the following year you could see another spike. And so that's my question, is how do we plan to handle and manage that?
Yeah, no, and I did explain that to the school committee as well. This is kind of a fluid issue in the district right now, again, because of the various grade levels that are seeing movement and just with our numbers. So it is going to be something on an annual basis that we're going to have to be making staffing adjustments to. And from being in schools, I know that it's disruptive to staff. You take 2 out, add 2. You don't want to be doing it year to year. So this is something that we're going to be looking at longer term, but based on, certainly next year's 4th grade going to 5th, and even, it's hard to fully project out 3rd going up. That 3rd grade class does not look like a significantly large class that couldn't be, again, in under the guidelines. But it is going to be something that we're on top of and we're evaluating from time to time. And if it ever got to the point where it looked like it was going to exceed the limits, I indicated to the school committee I would go to them and make a recommendation for an adjustment.
Okay. And my last question was, do you feel like at this point, Dr. Lang, that you have exhausted all other options in terms of the positions within the district rather than cutting those positions, the teacher positions? And again, I wasn't a part of the process. I'm just asking. I know a lot of people in town are asking that. Have we looked at all possible areas to cut before we cut the front line?
Right. And again, I would say that we have. I wouldn't bring a recommendation to the school committee if we had not gone page by page, line by line through the budget and taken a look at adjustments. One of the things that you have to do, unfortunately, when you're looking through school budgets and you're trying to manage school budgets, is look at class size. One of your significant drivers within a budget is going to be your staffing costs, and it's your salaries and your benefits, and it's very, yes, would I love to have a class size at 18 if I could? Yes, but it's just in the current constraints of the budget that we have, it was just not doable to keep those class sizes at 18 and end up cutting, a whole program or a whole curriculum or something like that that's going to have district-wide ramifications as opposed to containing a cut to a particular school or a particular program like that. So we have, and again, I don't think that I don't want to give false hope that tomorrow I'm going to recommend something different, because I wouldn't have made this recommendation if I didn't believe in it. But this is going to be a topic that I think the school committee continues to discuss and to look at as we're gearing up for this next year's budget. And again, this is only going to continue to impact us in the years to come.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Janet Dubner, Precinct 6. On page 29 of your budget, I just have one question.
Sure.
Coordinator of Integrated Preschool, the CHIPS program. The actual for this year is $46,517. It jumps to $94,000 next year and $98,000 the year after, with no change in the full-time equivalent.
Which page?
Page 29, the top section, Coordinator of the Integrated Preschool program.
Yes, what used to happen with the preschool program is they would take an offset to the CHIPS revolving fund revenue that comes in. Instead of applying the offset to like that one particular position, if you look at, the offset was just reallocated elsewhere in the budget. Let me pull it up for you. If you look at page 33, you'll see the offset to CHIPS is actually just being allocated against the teacher line item instead of the director line item, and the offset has gone up to $115,000. So the increase is actually more significant, but we don't want to have an offset that actually exceeds just one salary. So where the offset went over the amount of the salary, it's easy to allocate it against the 7 teaching positions as opposed to 1. So the offset is still there. It's just going to appear on a different page of the budget.
The salary, though, is $98,000?
Salary
for that
was
position?
always $98,000. It's just that, again, you're not seeing the offset on that page of the budget. It's being applied on a different page.
Okay, thank you.
John Salmon, Precinct 2. I just had a couple different questions. One is, a little while ago, you said the assistant business manager was paid from a grant. I think in a school committee meeting, it was said that it was paid through ComEd. Is that true, or is it paid through a?
No, it's going to be paid through revolving funds, ComEd being one of them,
Okay.
and grant funds. So it's not going to have an impact on the local budget.
Did the KCC program run through ComEd at all, or no?
Yes, KCC.
Are we seeing any savings from having full-day kindergarten, not having that? Have we allocated any funds from there in that cost, or no?
The KCC program, any of the funding that would have come in would have gone to pay the teaching staff for that particular program. So that program is going to undergo some pretty significant change next year because you're not going to have that programming, but you're not going to have the revenue coming in to offset it.
Okay, my other question was, you were talking about kind of equity between Parker and McCarthy in terms of the middle school positions. Do you foresee with the numbers staying where they are, say they stay where they are, moving forward the following year and cutting 2 grade 6 positions, then 2 grade 7, and then 2 grade 8, or no?
It's possible. I mean, again, given the scenario, if we get into the fall and the incoming 5th grade class, again, if our class sizes are under 25, they're 22, they're 23, then the natural move would be for those 8 sections to filter up to 8 and not 10. So that would, and again, I said this at the school committee meeting, I wish we weren't in a situation where I was bringing forward these recommendations to eliminate positions to solve the budget problem. I wish I were recommending, reallocating those positions to a different need within the department. So instead of, having those 2 positions there, being able to hire, say, a full-time psychologist, or being able to hire a nurse, or being able to hire something else, I would like to reallocate some of those funds to hit some of those needs that we haven't been able to address, instead of keeping those class sizes, kind of artificially low compared to the Parker.
All right, my other question was around the kindergarten teachers. We're hiring 10 new kindergarten teachers.
8 right now.
8, and then possibly 2 going forward. What have you guys budgeted for in terms of how average salary? Like when you look at your salaries across the scale, you're saying we're budgeting for Master's Step 1, Master's Step 5?
Master's 3.
Master's
3. So
3.
any position where we were seeing a retirement, resignation, any vacant position within the budget, we just typically budget at Master's Step 3. It's about $56,000.
Okay. And my last question was, was there ever any conversation with the school committee about coming to the town and asking for that $500,000, going to Paul and saying, is there a way we can put something forward in town meeting to discuss that?
Not specifically. I mean, when I spoke with the school committee and we were cutting or making budget reductions to get to the $57 million, I think, I certainly appreciate the town manager's recommendation of the $57 million. It incorporates, at the time, the money for full day K, which again is something that I think the community has been wanting for a lot of time. I think parents certainly have, the administration of the school committee certainly has. I think the $57 million was a reasonable recommendation budget-wise compared to the other town needs as well, but we did not have that specific conversation.
All right, thank you.
Beth Logan, Precinct 3. I'd like to move the question.
We have a motion to move the question. So what that means is that if you vote in favor of that motion to move the question, we will terminate debate and discussion and question and answer, and we will just address that. So this is a motion to move the question. We are not voting on the appropriation. We are only voting to terminate question and answer and discussion. So please pick your voting devices, and an affirmative vote means that you want to terminate further question and answer and discussion. Still passes. Yes, this passes 110 in favor, 30 opposed, 0 abstentions, so it does pass the 2/3 requirement. So now we are going to be voting on Article 4, which is an appropriation of $57 million to the school budget. A vote in favor is to approve the budget. A vote opposed is not to approve the budget. So the article passes 105 in favor, 34 opposed, and 1 abstention. We will now move to Article 5. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 5 is the general government operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year 2018. Basically, we vote by line items, by personnel and expenses. It's listed in the motion in your packets. I just sort of give you an overview of how the budget was constructed, and I think the superintendent, some of his remarks sort of gave you a sense of what we were dealing with. Basically, it's essentially a level service approximate budget that we're providing. There's no increase, material increase in staffing levels for the general government employees. Capital infrastructure budget, which will come up later this evening, is maintained at $3.3 million. And much like you heard in the discussion earlier this evening regarding Neshoba Tech, we are putting in a payment towards our ongoing OPEB liability that is growing. Again, the project priorities continue to be education at the top of the spectrum, public safety, which includes public works in terms of snow and ice and other roadway activities, capital infrastructure, and public health and human services. These are the actual budgetary line item increases. As you can see, as was just approved, we approved a $2.45 million increase in the public schools, or a 4.5% increase. The other increases are significant. The next largest one, obviously, and plays off the discussion we had earlier, is benefits and insurance. $1.67 million in benefits and insurance, or 7.85%. And then obviously your other increases go into public safety and public works and debt service. Here are the sort of broken out by major expenditures. Again, public schools at the top. The health insurance, 11.23% increase. Again, we've got increased enrollments because we're adding staff, the kindergarten teachers, instructors that we spoke about earlier, as well as a rate increase that is 7% after doing plan design change of higher co-payments and deductibles. Had we not gone through that plan design change, the rate increase in premiums for health insurance would have been over 11%. We also have an increase in non-excluded debt service. That is for the modular classrooms that were approved by town meeting back at the last session in the fall. We have an increase in our pension assessment from Middlesex Retirement System. We're adjusting our snow and ice removal budget. We have an increase in the ongoing personnel staffing in fire and police personnel costs. Our solid waste and recycling collection contract is going up because the vendor on the contract, you got increased fuel costs, increased labor costs. Again, that's competitively procured. Our solid waste disposal, which is the tipping cost at the waste energy plant, is going up by 3.42%. And again, we're watching the tonnage because, as was noted earlier, if you're going to have increased units, you're going to have increased tonnage and disposal and additional collection. And we spoke earlier, and you approved the Neshoba Tech assessment. Again, just diving into some of the numbers real significantly, you can see there's a 3.6% increase, or $270,000 increase in the retirement assessment. They look into that. What we're experiencing, this is the breakdown of the 10-year retirement assessment to the Middlesex Retirement System. You can see that the payment that we'll be making this year is $7.8 million. If you look at it real closely, the biggest driver in this is that fourth column called payment on unfunded pension liability. That's $6.4 million. Our normal cost for in the pension system is $1.3 million. And that's because of this Commonwealth's requirement that all pension systems be fully funded by the year 2037. Middlesex is on a 2035 funding schedule. What's happening here is the system is not, it has an actuarial evaluation every 2 years. And obviously, despite the fact that the stock market has been doing well this year, historically, it's not returning a rate of 7.85%. So what's happening is the actuarials are reducing the anticipated return from investment, which then drives up the assessment because you've only got 20 years to pay off the unfunded liability. And to let you know what's happening, there is the unfunded liability. You can see the last 2-year assessment, actuarial assessment, the liability went up by 9% or $8 million. So things just aren't breaking not only Chelmsford's way, we're in the system. The state actually manages these resources, so it's not even Middlesex anymore that holds the money. It's done by the state. And again, this is universal across the Commonwealth and obviously even into other states, that this pension obligation. So you can see that the $7.8 million assessment includes that $6.4 million towards the unfunded liability, which is an increase of $200,000 from the prior fiscal year. We also have the issue of OPEB. The other post-employment benefits are basically retiree health care liability. You saw in the presentation under the first article tonight, under Article 2, the increased number of retirees because we're having people living longer and obviously health care costs are growing. We are right now doing our biannual assessment right now. This is the data from the last assessment. You can see that the increase in the OPEB obligation is $4.3 million. So we now have a $93 million as of the January 1st, 2015 liability. But when we gather at fall town meeting, we'll have the data for the January 1st, 2017, because that's being calculated now by the actuarials. But you can see at a funding level of $1 million, we're only contributing a third of what's necessary, or we should be putting aside $3 million if we wanted to eliminate this liability by the year 2045. So therefore, we're sort of quietly accruing this increased liability. You look at the two of them combined, it's rather staggering. It's greater, obviously, than the town's budget, operating budget. It's $190 million, and as I say, when we gather here next time, it'll be over $200 million. And in fact, the accounting standards now require us to record at the end of this year's financial statements, not just Chelmsford, but all municipalities across the nation. You'll have to record and recognize in your balance sheets your unfunded liability. So you obviously, it's again this increased awareness and cost that's going up. Debt service. The big picture is overall our debt service is rather strong. Coming from our rating agency back last June when we last borrowed money, our net debt is low at 1.6% of our town's market value, and approximately 79% of the direct debt will be repaid within the next 10 years, which is a positive credit factor. The non-excluded debt increase, as I indicated, is now increasing by $388,000 or 5.37% to $7.6 million. The excluded debt service, which goes towards the sewer project, the 2004 to 2007 school project, and the land acquisition for DPW is actually decreasing by $111,000. So there's some good news there. And in terms of the general government employees, if you look back over the last decade, we're virtually unchanged. For full-time equivalent employees, if you went back here to fiscal year 08, we were 241. We're now 244. So we're not sort of out of control on a hiring binge within the community. You know, much like the school has a list, and you saw it printed and referred to in the earlier discussion of unmet needs and priorities that could be funded. And you can be assured that there are similar needs in the police department, fire department, public works, facilities, and other areas of the community. In terms of the revenue sources, this is what's happening, folks, and this is why your taxes go up, because we're hanging on here. We're in fact forecasting in the allowed 2.5% increase. We project $1.4 million in new growth, which is a realistic assessment for a non-reval year when we look historically, and in fact $1.4 million aside from this last year when we did the whole town-wide survey. That number is what it's been, and we expect it will continue to be. Yes, these new projects are coming, but they won't be realized by this June 30th in terms of growth in the tax levy. So even if you have a $12 million investment, such as in that apartment proposal that's in the town center behind Brickhouse Pizza that I spoke about earlier, yes, that's a $12 million investment, and perhaps the assessment on that building may be $10 million when it's completed. You know, again, you're not going to capture that this year. So again, when you do see those costs, you will have some offsetting revenue, but not helping us in 18. State aid. This is where you ought to be paying particular attention. Our state aid this year is only forecast to go up by 1.5%, or $252,000. That's what's underlying this, folks. We're not receiving the support from the state that's necessary to meet the needs of the community. You just heard discussions, and we'll touch about it in a few moments, about the cost for a bus contract of $100,000+. Then you heard about the cost for staff and so forth. 1.5% or $250,000 doesn't put a dent in the increase in the school budget, never mentioned the overall general government of the town. Local receipts we're estimating an increase of $400,000 or 4.28%, and then there's miscellaneous available funds. Again, if you start looking at what the average single-family property tax bill pays, obviously it's sort of a priority of where does the money go. Half of that, you know, $3,000 of that would go towards the school budget, or 44% of that. And you can see the second largest budget driver, as I noted earlier, roughly 17% of our budget goes towards benefits and insurance. And then you can see 11% towards debt service, and then it goes to public safety, just under 10%. Again, the reality in Chelmsford is no different than the reality across statewide. We provide this at every town meeting. You look at the statewide rank, one would be the largest average single-family property tax bill, which would be in the community of Weston. Then you go down to your Dovers and your Sherburns and so forth, and then you go down to the 300s. You can see, you know, things aren't moving on that. So yes, taxes are going up in Chelmsford, and they're going up significantly. The 5-year increase is 22%, or $1,259. And we recognize that the average single-family tax bill is $6,900. But you can see everybody's going up because our ranking is basically staying unchanged at 68, 70, and so forth. State aid, this is the killer. The state aid, we've seen the governor's budget released in the end of January, and as we're meeting this week, the state Massachusetts House of Representatives is considering their budget. The Ways and Means Committee released their proposed budget 2 weeks ago. It was voted affirmatively today. Now they're taking up all the budget amendments over the next few days. The problem is the top line there, Chapter 70. That's education aid from the Commonwealth. The governor proposed a whopping $20 per student increase in education funding this year. With less than 5,000 students, the increase was less than $100,000. With the House, as we anticipated, said we'll do better than the governor, so they're proposing $30 per student. So the numbers roughly are less than $150,000. We know how the pattern works, so therefore when we prepared our budget, we assume we get more than what the governor proposed. So our numbers are roughly around what likely will come out of the legislature, and there's no indication that there's any serious consideration of going above $30 per student. $150,000, as you said, that doesn't even meet their special ed case increase load. Never mind the compensation for teachers' cost of living, utilities, you name all the expenditures that a community has in the general government side as well, for cost of living and other services and snow and ice removal and so forth. The other driver is general government aid. It's $5 million. The governor is committed to increasing the general government aid, which you can see is about half of the education aid by the growth in the state's budget, but yet he hasn't, nor has the legislature, agreed to increase the education funding at the level of growth in the state budget. So again, we're looking at $16.85 million in state aid. Local receipts, as I mentioned on an earlier time when I was up here, we're projecting just under $10 million at $9.75 million. Again, if you look at that 9.75, it's not overly conservative. You can see the highest year was 16, which was 10.3. Before that, it was 9.3, 9.5, 8.3. Again, that's driven by motor vehicle excise. You can see we estimate $4.8 million. We hit our peak around $5.2 million. You can see that if you go the year before that, it was 4.8, 4.7, 4.3. And again, that ebbs and flows. And so we're anticipating that the 4.8 should be about where it's at. And part of the reason for that is if you're familiar with your motor vehicle excise bill, that has a very steep depreciation curve on a new vehicle in your first 5 years of ownership. And then the last area is available funds. We have, again, this is miscellaneous. This is the other component of the budget, just minor miscellaneous revenues that offset the operating costs. So with that, Mr. Moderator, that concludes my remarks and presentation for the general operating budget of the town. Obviously, the audience has the spiral-bound detail of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 5.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
All right, now's an opportunity for question and answer, debate, discussion, whatever.
That was non-so.
Henry Houle, Precinct 4. Paul, on slide 63, can you explain to me what the fire department personnel services and the police?
Yeah.
Since we got level staffing.
Yeah, there's no increase in staffing in the fire or police. What's happening, and I think, Hank, being on the fire department, I think you're pretty familiar with this, we have a rather junior set of firefighters who are increasing on the pay scale. We have a pay scale of 5 to 6 steps in terms of a starting salary, and then when they max out, and then basically you hit longevity periods at 10, 20, 25 years. So what's happening is when we look at those actual staff personnel and we project those out with the two chiefs, what is not in these numbers, and again, the superintendent mentioned it earlier, and I'll reiterate it because it's important to acknowledge, according to our bylaws, we cannot pre-fund collective bargaining agreements. We are now, currently as today, we are in arbitration, mediation, heading towards arbitration with the firefighters union, the police patrol union, the police superior officers, which is the sergeant's union, on the general government side. So those numbers aren't put aside yet, nor has the school reached agreement with the teachers union. So the big unions are out. As you said, in the school budget, different set of provisions under state law. Their money is in their budget. Under our bylaws and requirements, town meeting has to vote under state law those agreements at such time they are reached. So those numbers are not in there. So these numbers are not reflective of increases in a contract settlement. These are reflective of existing personnel with a current pay scale moving along the pay grades and either achieving a step increase or a longevity increase. And I think as members of the bargaining units would say to you, and I would agree with it, we are not the highest paying police or fire, compensation communities. We effort as all our efforts to be competitive. So it's not as though we're out of whack with how we're compensating our police and firefighters. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Steve Flynn, Precinct 3. Paul, you mentioned state aid. We have 5 representatives in the state house who represent Chelmsford. Over the many years ago, occasionally one would come in and explain why we don't get what we deserve. Why we haven't seen them over the years?
Well, the problem you aren't going to see them this time of the year is because, as I mentioned earlier, the House is in budget session today as we speak and all week. But quite frankly, whether we have 5 reps or 3 reps or 1 rep.
5.
Right, but whether we have that or not, it's not going to change because it's not there's a statewide formula for Chapter 70 education aid and general government aid. And it goes to the question that you heard earlier this evening regarding the Neshoba Tech and why is it that the community, another community pays only $11,000 per student if you divide it simply versus Chelmsford paying $15,000. It's because the state formula measures your per capita median income. It also measures your property assessment in terms of commercial and residential property value and so forth. That's how the state formula works. And the reason the formula doesn't get amended is the fact that if you're going to give to someone, you're going to have to take from somebody else. And no legislature, you just can't get that through the system. And the only other way to do it, get more money in, is to raise revenue. And you've got a governor who's committed to not raising taxes on broad base, and you've got a House Speaker who's not going to raise taxes. And whether that's right or wrong is for everybody in every community to decide, every voter. But the reality that we have when we prepare a budget and deal with the situation we're in, we deal with the cards that were dealt. And as I say, at this point in the equation, that's not going to change this year in terms of we've seen the governor's, he's put his budget out, and now we've seen the House Ways and Means, which is reflective of the House budget. So again, it's not as though community X, in Tewksbury or Wilmington or Westford is going to get this bonanza. Most of the communities in the Commonwealth, of the 351 communities, and you assemble all the school districts and so forth, but the large majority of them are just getting the minimum contribution of 20 to 30, probably ultimately it's going to be $30 per student. So this is what happens, and this is why we don't have the means to fund the desired programs that I think many in the room would like to see. And it's also the fact that we just have to deal with the economic realities of the times in terms of what people want. It also explains the frustration as to why property tax goes up, because as you can see, we're levying to the full levy capacity. This past year, we had some cash, we were under the levy capacity. This budget, as it goes, will now bring us to full levy capacity, which again, is we're doing everything we can, and the whole purpose of that is to maintain what we think is the acceptable and expected level of services in the community.
I would have really one other issue. If you read the papers lately, you look at schools, our newest school is 1971, I believe.
74.
74, well, actually it was 71, it was completed in 74.
Right, exactly.
We spend so much money, and I look at the other towns, just recently, University of Lowell, 13 new buildings in 6 years. Lowell, 4 new high schools, not high schools, now they're getting a new high school. I mean, why are we so far behind the apple here? I mean, why we haven't got any new schools? We keep on putting money into these things.
Well, there's a proposal right now. The school committee and the Board of Selectmen supported the statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for a school building project. We expect that answer within the next 9 to 10 months. And then, as we know, it's a 6 or 7 year process, and it's going to be up to the voters of the community, town meeting, and at the ballot, whether they want to make an investment of what's going to be, 70, 100, 150 million, whatever project the town decides, but that's to come. But I think that process is underway, but by no means is it certain. And I think what you're seeing in the meantime is we're dealing with the known space issues that we have today and the ones that we'll likely see before any school gets opened. And the earliest you could expect a school to open right now would probably be 2024, 2023 perhaps. What's
one
out
other
there.
question, moderator. I just like to inform the citizens here that we have the largest senior population in the state at 24.3. Within 5 years, we'll have 30% of the people who are taxpayers in this town are senior citizens. They don't have the 401ks a lot of folks have today. So we got to look at that in the future years, because, I mean, the reason I get so many calls, why the taxes are going up, we realize that. But these folks can't afford it. I'm just bringing that out to show where our population in town is, okay, guys? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Arroway, Precinct 1. I just have a question, and I'd like some clarification on it. On slide 79, talks about available funds, and I think the introductory slide also talked about them in terms of transferring funds into the general operating budget. One of those funds was the sewer betterments. I always thought sewer betterment funds went to sewer betterments, and maybe you can clarify how this works.
Yeah, what it is it's the money that's collected from sewer betterments pays the debt service on the sewer project. So in our operating budget, we have the debt service line for the sewer project. Those monies go towards paying off that debt service. So, you know, so that's what that number represents. So it's not like we're not taking sewer betterment money to support the operating budget for the,
Okay.
you know, for the senior center. It's basically paying the sewer betterment debt service.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Regazio, Precinct 7. The $64 question here is, what's the impact of this budget, this approved budget, going to be on the tax rate? We're talking $200-300 increase in the average real estate tax?
Yes, and just look at the data, this trend. You can see the average increase is averaging between $200 to $300 per year, and there's no reason to expect that that's going to change as long as the town maintains a uniform tax rate and the appreciation of real estate values continues to be on residential. This is that one metric that is statewide that we see. Unless those figures change, I don't see how it's going to happen.
No, I agree. I just want to make certain everybody's aware of what we're voting on, and that we're voting on a $200-300 real estate tax increase for the coming year.
That's to be expected, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being no one else, please pick up your voting devices. A vote yes is to approve the budget. Vote no is not to.
So you've probably noticed the contrast between the length of time needed to debate the town's general operating budget compared to the time allocated for the school budget. It should be noted that the school budget of $57 million was approved unanimously by the school committee. What's really was the length of debate there had to do with how that money was allocated, which the school board has the power to allocate along with the
article
superintendent.
passes, 135
in any case,
in favor, 4 opposed, no abstentions.
With only four only 4 opposed to the town budget.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 6
went through
is
with
the
smooth sailing.
funding for collective bargaining agreements. I'm going to turn the podium over to the towns in my new assistant town manager, Mike McCall. With the transition we had in the manager's office, Mike has basically taken some of his new responsibilities include that of collective bargaining, and he's done a great efforts. You can see he's brought in 2 contracts for approval, and we're fortunate to, and we're starting to see the results of his diligence. He started after the first of the year. Obviously, he's very familiar with you, with many in the community, and I'm fortunate to have him join the excellent staff that we have with the town. So with this, I'll turn the mic over to Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Did anybody move the reading of this?
I'm sorry?
Did we read this, or did someone move to waive the reading of this article?
We have been, as a matter of course, waiving it for a while.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As the manager mentioned earlier, we have 4 of our major contracts that are entering mediation. Since we were here last fall at town meeting, I've been able to negotiate 2 of the collective bargaining agreements, one with the clerical union and one with the dispatch union, keeping in line with the framework set by the Board of Selectmen, which was to try and maintain a 2% increase per year over the life of our 3-year agreements. I reached an agreement with the clerical union, and that would be a 2% annual increase over the 3-year period of the contract. In lieu of retroactive pay, we agreed upon a one-time signing bonus of $500, and that first year of fiscal 17 becomes effective July 1 this year. Additionally, to reach parity with some of the other unions, we did create a longevity incentive for 25 years of service. Similarly, with the dispatchers, we reached an agreement this last week, again for a 3-year contract within the framework that the Board of Selectmen had laid out for a 2-2-2 over the 3 years. This will be, in lieu of retroactive pay, a one-time signing bonus, and the 2% will become effective the beginning of this month, April 1st. And again, we made some minor changes to the longevity schedules to keep them in line with the rest of the bargaining units. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I'm sorry. Finance Committee, do you have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 6.
And the Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Okay, now's the time for questions or debate.
Precinct 6. Perhaps I'm just a little confused on these numbers. You've got an increase, for example, in the first one of 17,000 something for the first year, and then it's almost double that for FY18. What am I missing?
I might have to defer to it compounds, but these are the numbers when I provided the terms of the agreement to the town accountant. She came back. It's effective January 1st on the clerical union, so we're only paying half a year.
Okay.
So the next year is FY18 for the full 12 months.
Okay, that would explain it. Thank you.
Marlene Cody, Precinct 4. What are the longevity things you're offering them?
So as alluded to earlier, that there are typically agreements within the various collective bargaining units that once someone reaches an anniversary of 10 years, 15 years, 20, and 25, there is a stipend or incentive that is offered. Most of the unions have a standardized table with set stipend amounts. The clerical union and the dispatch were below what the majority of the other unions were, so in the course of negotiating the time frame of the agreements as well as the 222, we made those adjustments to bring them up.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being none, we will now vote. This is a 2/3 vote. Yeses to approve the transfer of funds. No is not to.
If ever there were a budget item that warranted a 100% acceptance, it would certainly be one involving collective bargaining. And I see, however, that there is one town meeting rep voting against this, but it passes overwhelmingly nonetheless.
The article passes by more than 2/3, 137 in favor, 3 opposed, no abstentions. Now we're going to be getting to Article 7, which is the first of the articles in my proposed consent agenda. So I will request a vote on a consent agenda for Articles 7, 12, 13, 17, and 18. And the reason why these are all routine except Article 13, which has to do with Chelmsford telemedia, and the reason why we included that in was because it is a contract that had already been approved by the town. This is just to fund it from revenues from your wireless or your internet from Fios or Verizon and Comcast. So those are the articles. So, yes. Pardon? 7, 12, 13, 17, and 18. Yes, you can have discussion. No, 11 is not in there. I'm just doing it as
Laura Merrill, Precinct 2. I would like to remove Article 7 from the consent agenda, specifically because, unlike the others, there has been controversy about this specific article over the years, and I think that it's inappropriate to include this in with the consent agenda, since the Finance Committee is in charge of these funds and the moderator appoints the Finance Committee.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So we will take a vote on the motion by, this is a motion, right? Yes, so there actually is a motion to amend by removing from the consent agenda item number 7, which is the $400,000 Finance Committee emergency fund, which we have been had in our budget for as long as I can remember. So all those in favor of removing Article 7 from the consent agenda, just raise your chits. All those opposed? Okay, so now we're back to the original consent agenda. Do we have any discussion on that?
Mr. Moderator, Dennis Sheehan, Precinct 4. I understand the idea of trying to speed up town meeting, but I actually think the consent agenda is actually confusing, and we should just knock these out. Just do them as they go. I think it's going to be faster and less confusing for everyone.
That's fine. The town manager is going to explain the 5 articles, and then again, you can always vote against the consent agenda, but I think that it worked last time. So, Mr. Manager?
Do you want me to explain first, or do you want to do the vote?
Okay, well, we can vote. Do you want to vote in favor of the concept of the consent agenda? And you always can remove articles later. All those in favor of a consent agenda for those articles, please raise your chits. All those opposed? Passes. Okay, Mr. Manager.
Okay, Article 7 is the Finance Committee Reserve Fund. The request here is once again $400,000. I think it's the 9th or 10th year it's been at the $400,000 figure. And it's provided in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 6. And basically what the law provides is that transfers from the reserve fund are voted by the Finance Committee, and they're limited to extraordinary or unforeseen expenditures. And the idea behind this was there were situations where an immediate need arose, and to avoid the expense and effort of calling a town meeting, you would give the Finance Committee that discretion to meet that extraordinary or unforeseen expenditure. The requested amount of $400,000 amounts to about a third of 1% of the town's $128 million operating budget. Every year, the Finance Committee provides detail in its warrant book of how the monies have been expended. You may recall last year we expended it at town meeting, largely towards the purchase of a ladder truck that was unforeseen. And this year, you saw earlier under Article 2, it was for these unanticipated expenditures that arose during the course of the fiscal year. So that's the discussion regarding Article 7. Article 12 is the Golf Course Enterprise Fund. Basically, it's a $30,000 appropriation to operate the Golf Course Enterprise for the upcoming fiscal year. The Golf Course Enterprise Fund has been $30,000 again for about a decade. What's going on there is the golf course is not supported by your property taxes or state aid or any other component. Basically, the town periodically issues a request for proposals for the management of the Chelmsford Country Club, our public golf course. The revenue that comes in from that lease agreement goes back and is funded into the golf course for the ongoing maintenance of the course itself in terms of the irrigation systems, the wells, the pumps, reconstructing different holes and so forth, and also into the building that's supported there. So that's Article 12. The next article is Article 13. Article 13, as the moderator mentioned earlier, is the PEG, Local Cable Access Public Education and Governmental Access Enterprise, which is basically, as the moderator noted earlier, it's the money that's the surcharge on your Comcast or Verizon bill in accordance with the town's cable television licenses. As was noted earlier, the budget is really a level service budget going forward. They have a personnel services in the budget as well as expenditures. Again, there's no new staff being added. It's just sort of rolling forward with what's going on over there. The next article is Article 17. Article 17, again, is another frequent article before the community. That has to do with the cemetery improvements. Again, the money from the sale of lots and graves goes to the Cemetery Improvement Fund. In this case, the Cemetery Commission is requesting $100,000 from the sale of lots and graves during the past year to go towards the continued completion of the cemetery project at the main cemetery in the community located, as you know, off of Riverneck and Billerica Road. So again, that's just funding to continue the pavement and clearing and design and construction and occupancy of the cemetery. And then the last one is the Community Action Program Grant, Article 18. And again, we come in every 18 months or 2 years or so to fund $10,000 under this program, which is to support individuals and organizations within the town of Chelmsford that wish to develop civic projects. Basically, this fund's been around by town meeting since 1997, and during that basically a generation or 2 decades, there's been 100 projects funded that total just over $100,000. So you can see the typical cost per project. And so once again, we're asked by the Community Action Program Committee to replenish the fund with $10,000. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation, and you can break it down per article?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Articles 7, 12, 13, 17, and 18.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen recommends approval of Article 7 by a vote of 4 to 1. Unanimously recommends approval of Articles 12, 13, 17, and 18.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, questions?
Andy Sillings, Precinct 7. What is the total amount of those?
Well, each one is a different amount. Paul, do you have?
Oh, we can go through it. Article 7 is raise and appropriate $400,000. Article 12 is, let's get to the right page. Article 12 is $30,000 for the Golf Course Enterprise Fund. Article 13 was the PEG Access Enterprise Fund. The total there is $758,253 from cable television licensing revenues. Article 17 is the $100,000 for the cemetery, and then Article 18, the Community Actions Program, is $10,000.
I'd like to know, because we're voting only once, what is the amount?
Well, just total those 5 numbers together and. $1,298,253. Thank you. If you're not an accountant, you've missed your calling. Okay. Any further discussion? There being none. All in favor of the consent agenda, please vote. Yes would be to approve those 5 articles. No would be not to approve all of those 5 articles.
So with that, those 5 articles being quickly dismissed, I'm pretty sure that we're going to be adjourning for the evening here, having accomplished roughly half of the articles on the town meeting warrant of 29.
We done?
The article passes 139 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstentions.
We done? Yeah, capital budget's next. We're never gonna.
Well, wait a second. We have someone at the microphone.
Yes, a question or a point of order. Do we feel that Article 8 might take us more than 10 minutes?
That's what we were just talking about, Mr. Polton. Thank you very much.
I would move then that we
adjourn until
we move
Thursday.
adjourn into a time certain on Thursday, 7:30 p.m.
All in favor? Thank you. Thank you. We got a lot done tonight.
Yeah, so as Town Moderator John Curlin just pointed out, we did get a lot done tonight, although a lot is relative depending on your tolerance for lengthy debate. We did get through 11 articles on this warrant of 29, which my math suggests we're about a third of the way through. More importantly, we did get through several big budget items. An amended fiscal 17 budget to handle about $800,000 that came up like extra snow removal. The Neshoba Valley assessment for next year amounting to $2.9 million. That actually went very smoothly tonight. The Chelmsford Public Schools budget of $57 million. The town's general operating budget of $61.2 million. And then finally, collective bargaining agreements that such as exist that are now complete. We'll have others coming down. Bigger unions have yet to be really resolved at this point. Coming up Thursday night, we'll be leading off with the capital budget of $3.3 million, which has been something of a lightning rod in recent years. And I think you can expect to hear some debate from the Board of Selectmen, certain members, as well as the public. Tonight, the longest debate was clearly the schools budget, not for the actual amount, the $57 million, because the school committee there voted 5-0 to approve that amount, but it wasn't as much as they would have liked. It's about $500,000 short, and so Superintendent Lang had to go back and coax the numbers to try to have come up with a balanced budget, and that included reducing 5 teaching positions, even as he was adding 10 more kindergarten teachers so that we can implement full-day kindergarten. Those reduced positions included a math position and 2 art positions at the high school, and importantly 2 fifth-grade teachers at McCarthy, which drew a lot of angst out of the town meeting reps here. People never like to see teachers laid off, and that seems to be what's going to be happening in the coming year unless something miraculous happens, and that's unlikely. So we will see you back here on Thursday night, where we resume with more action-packed debate on budget numbers, and we can look forward to speed limits, asphalt plants, and branding budget for the Route 129 corridor, among many others. I'm Kelly Beatty for the terrific staff and volunteers of Chelmsford Telemedia, wishing you a good night. See you on Thursday.